I call Congress to order. Good afternoon, Congress. You'll see I've been joined by the next Prime Minister and Secretary of State on the top table. Can I once again ask you to join with me in thanking the Hampshire Youth Folk Ensemble who's been playing for us this afternoon? So they really have been fantastic and very uplifting. And can I, on everyone's behalf, thank the National Education Union who have sponsored all the Music for Youth activities all of this week. Thank you. Delegates, I want to update you on business that we lost from yesterday. And again, thank you for your cooperation that we didn't lose any this morning. The business we lost was motion 63, small and rural schools. And I intend to take that after scheduled business tomorrow. The show Racism, the Red Card photo opportunity is going to be taken at the close of today's session, so if you can all stay for that. And the video presentation from Jacinda Ardern, the Prime Minister for New Zealand, which is definitely well worth watching, is going to be taken first thing tomorrow morning, so if you can make sure everybody's here bright and early. Just a quick reminder, delegates, to ensure we get through all the business, to respect speaking times, 5 minutes and 3 minutes for moving and seconding respectfully. And I ask all unions, and thank you for the cooperation this morning, to continue in that spirit, and hopefully we'll get through all the business this afternoon and can finish at a decent time tomorrow. Now, delegates, I'd now like to introduce to Congress the MP for North West Durham, trade unionist, and as announced by Jeremy Corbyn this morning, the future Secretary of State for Employment Rights, Laura Pidcock. Just before Laura starts, Laura was only elected to a Parliament in 2017, but she's been working hard behind the scenes, laying the foundations for a Labour government to make radical changes to the balance of power in the workplace. Congress, we discussed collective bargaining and some of the changes we want to see in the workplace yesterday, and I'm sure that what we're about to hear from Laura is going to form a vital part of taking those changes forward. And as a sign that these changes form a central plank of Labour's plans for the future, I'm really delighted that we've been joined on the platform by Jeremy Corbyn. Anyone who's heard Laura speak before knows how passionate she is. She's absolutely fantastic representative of all of our members and the working class generally. And Laura, with great pleasure, I'd like to invite you to address our Congress.
Thank you. Thank you very much to everybody here at Congress, and thank you so much for that fantastic welcome. Thank you for everything that you do in your trade unions, in representing and protecting workers. Thank you for all of the work that goes on behind the scenes. I know it can be stressful and is often without any thanks. Thanks, of course, to Mark Sawatka and Francis O'Grady and the TUC for its support, and to John Hendy and Keith Ewan. They've been thanked before, but I would personally like to thank them again, and to the IER for all of their hard work and good advice. The people in this room do the most amazing job of all. You represent workers in their time of need. You represent and negotiate their pay on behalf and their terms and conditions, and you deliver time and time again for those people in a seriously difficult legislative environment. And we are at a point in history where we have two paths ahead of us. We can have a very stark choice about what kind of society we want to be. One path leads us to more deregulation, privatisation and poverty pay. The other is a socialist vision of the workplace, where the trade union movement is free to do their job, where workers feel confident to be an active member of a union, feel free to meet with other union members, with their representatives, and can talk freely about their participation. because we have to be frank with each other in this room. There is a real sense of dissatisfaction in workplaces across the UK because workers in this country know that despite working longer hours than those in all other EU countries except Greece and Austria, millions cannot afford to make ends meet and are in poverty. 14.3 million people to be precise, and that shamefully includes 4.6 million children. Is there anything worse than not being able to feed your own child? Or knowing that you're not able to give them everything that they need. Going out to work day in, day out, working unsocial hours, often far from home, often in hostile environments, and at the end of that working week, still not being able to live a life that allows you to be comfortable and free from worry. And it is particularly sickening that the number of people living in poverty includes 9 million people in families where one or more adults are in work. There is only one conclusion that can be drawn from this, and that is that workers are not being paid enough. A recent survey of its members by USDO, the shop workers union, found that half of the members surveyed had missed meals in order to pay essential bills, with well over a third doing so on a regular basis. These appalling statistics are the consequences of the fact that in real terms, the value of people's wages is still lower than that of 10 years ago. Yet leading chief executives are now paid 133 times more than the average worker. So while some are quite literally able to lounge around in their excessive wealth, there are huge numbers of people who cannot put food on the table, who are stressed by their rise in debt, who are buying their shopping on credit cards, who are riddled with worry that another price increase will break the bank. There exists in society staggering levels of inequality. In the UK, 40% of total income goes to the top 20% of earners, while just 7% goes to the bottom 20%. And we know very well that pay stagnation and income inequality are a direct result of the attack on workers' ability to organise through their trade unions. And so I want to explain this. So trade unionism, to everyone outside of this room, is a simple and beautiful concept at the heart of this movement. And for every young person who has only ever heard about trade unions through the framework of the vested interests of those whose aim it is to smash organised labour, I want you to know that the best way to see your pay increase, to see a safer environment at work, to feel freer to express your opinion and have your rights realised is to join a trade union. It is the best thing that you will ever do. But trade unionism is not just about protection at work. It's not just a personal insurance scheme, is it? It's a statement of a common bond between fellow working people because all we have is each other. And I understand that the Labour Party has not always been the best ally of the trade union movement. New Labour, with its 3 parliamentary majorities, could have repealed the restrictive anti-union Thatcher legislation, and shamefully they missed that opportunity. And as a result, and you'll have felt this in your workplaces, many working class people lost confidence about which side this party was really on. But now, under Jeremy Corbyn's leadership, we have a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to right that wrong, and we will do just that. We need a radical transformation of the workplace, and therefore a Labour government will establish a Ministry of Employment Rights. The department will be responsible for transforming our workplaces by delivering a huge rollout of individual and collective rights at work and legislation for enforcement powers to make these rights meaningful. It will establish a National Joint Advisory Council for representatives of government, employers, unions and experts to meet and advise. Above all, this will mean that working people will be heard at the cabinet table, exactly as it should be. And the beating heart of this department will be the rollout of sectoral collective bargaining. Now, I realise that the concept may be familiar to people in this room, but people outside of this room may be wondering what on earth I'm talking about, and I don't blame them, because the percentage of workers covered by collective agreements has dwindled rapidly over the last 40 years. Our Labour government will re-establish national collective bargaining between trade unions and employers in each sector of our economy. That was the British way for most of the 20th century, and it's still the way that successful economies of Northern Europe manage their industrial relations. Sector-wide collective bargaining will set minimum and legally binding pay, terms and conditions for every employer and every worker in the sector. In practice, that means rather than the employer having all of the power to determine what your conditions and pay are at work, they will be legally obliged to enter into negotiation with your trade union. A giant step forward in rebalancing the unequal power relations that exist between worker and employer. Just imagine the transformative impact that would have on, say, the care sector, where the mostly female workforce has seen these highly skilled and professional area of work become a minimum wage job, where care workers are not paid for travel time between visits and can end up working for 10 hours for 5 hours pay. What a scandalous state of affairs that is. The very people looking after some of the most poorly and vulnerable people in our country are being paid less than the minimum wage. And think of the effect on those in their care. Well, we are calling time on this kind of exploitative practice, because under a Labour government, those care sector employers would be legally obliged to come to the table and negotiate all aspects of industry, the conditions in the workplaces, and fundamentally their pay. So whether you are a care worker from Dundee or Durham, you would be secure in the knowledge that minimum terms and conditions negotiated for the sector will restore dignity and a decent life to you and those you look after. As socialists, we know that to blame individuals for what are failings of the system is futile. We don't do it. We know that often, though, issues over pay and jobs can fuel racism towards minority communities who have come to live and work here. It is utterly misguided to blame the suppression of wages on migrant labour. The blame must be placed squarely with the greedy, exploitative employer. And we know that anything that creates division amongst us is helpful to them. Sectoral collective bargaining will mean that whatever your nationality, you will be paid the same terms and conditions. And we will repeat again and again and again that immigrants are not a threat to your way of life, but austerity, a government run by millionaires who couldn't care less about working people, is. And of course, collective bargaining will take time, but in the meantime, once we have passed the legislation, there will be things that we can do very quickly. Jeremy mentioned them earlier, but let me say again what will change, and let's repeat this over and over to every single person who says nothing will change. We will fix the problem of different categories of worker having different rights by creating a single status of worker for everyone at work, except those genuinely in business on their own account. We will ensure every worker has their full right from day one. We will raise the minimum wage for all workers over 16 to £10 an hour by 2020. We will eliminate zero-hour contracts by requiring employers to give all workers a contract that accurately reflects their fixed and regular hours. There will be 4 new public holidays on top of the statutory on top of the statutory holiday entitlement so that workers in the UK get the same time off as workers in other countries are given. We will once and for all make equal pay a reality and make equality and discrimination law fit for purpose. We will hold a public inquiry into blacklisting to ensure that that truly shameful practice becomes and remains a thing of the past. We will ban anti-trade union practices and protect union members from intimidation, harassment and threats. And we will strengthen protection of trade union representatives against unfair dismissal. And of course, the Labour Party will repeal the 2016 Trade Union Act, but more than that, will stop trade unions being weighed down by unnecessary and burdensome legislation and create new freedoms that enable workers to organise and negotiate better pay and a better quality of work and life. So, of course, we'll facilitate online balloting, as you resolved yesterday afternoon. But we'll go further than that. We'll allow workplace ballots and elections secret, secure and free from interference. We will make trade union access to the workplace much easier. And as the Secretary of State, the future Secretary of State, I shouldn't get ahead of myself, as the future Secretary of State, let me assure you that I understand that working class people do not withdraw their labour without good reason. It's the last resort when all else fails. So our new trade union rights and freedoms will acknowledge this. What we are proposing to do is not an act of charity from the Labour Party to the trade union movement, but it's simply upholding our international obligations and doing what is right by working class people. Nobody goes to work to be injured, made ill or lose their life because of inadequate protections at work. These things are happening too often. The GMB have reported at one warehouse in Staffordshire where ambulances were called 115 times in 3 years. We know, therefore, that harm at work is commonplace. And even before the new legislation comes in, I will establish a royal commission to examine all aspects of health and safety and advise on new, fresh, relevant legislation to keep every single worker safe and well. Of course, I understand that the Labour Party can announce some of the most progressive rights for workers that Britain has seen in generations, but without power to enforce them, they become much more difficult to realise. The current government regularly announce that workers will have the right to request this or that, as though we should, bow and be very, very grateful and deferential to them, a contract of employment or flexible working, as if somehow that will be good enough, when in reality we know and we see time after time that they can consider that request and turn it down with very little scrutiny. Therefore, a Labour government will set up a worker protection agency which will be properly resourced and have the power to enter and inspect workplaces, issue enforcement notices and in some cases reinstate unfairly dismissed workers. They will uphold national and workplace agreements. They will enforce the outcome of tribunal rulings and much more. This will be a mechanism that good employers can use to stop being undercut by bad employers. The agency will fundamentally be an ally of the worker, the trade union, and the good employer. I mentioned two paths at the beginning. One which further entrenches us in the grip of unfettered capitalism and worker exploitation, or one which breaks from this tradition, offering a wave of hope to working people. I know that every single person in this room and working people across the UK will choose the path of hope, of light and of justice. It is now within our gift to deliver it. That's some responsibility. But I honestly have never been more optimistic that our movement can achieve what we've set out to do throughout history, and that working people will see that. They will see a socialist-led Labour government delivering the most progressive and life-changing legislative programme the country has ever seen. And when we are attacked for that, which we inevitably will be attacked for that, we should remember that our opponents do not attack us because they are strong. They attack us because they are weak and they are losing their grip. They attack us because they know very well that we are the ones in the right. We must have that change, brothers and sisters, not just for working people, but for the planet that we inhabit. The crossroads that we have talked about for many years has arrived. We must not be led astray from the path of hope and fundamental change, and we must show absolutely no fear. We have to stay focused, and in the coming weeks and months, as a movement, we have to convey to the almost 33 million workers out there and the families who depend on them exactly what it will mean to have a Labour government. John McDonnell promised to bring unions into the heart of government. My department is the door through which they can enter. But this inspiring vision, these essential reforms, will be no more than a dream if we don't win the next election. So we will depend on you, your resources, your influence, your energy, your eloquence, and your persuasive powers to get the message out to working people of our four nations. But have absolutely no doubt, brothers and sisters, that we can and we will win. Thank you very much.
Well, Laura, I think you can see that went down fairly well. So can I, on behalf of everybody, say that you can tell from the reception that you've had that people are enthused, they're inspired. We've got striking health visitors up on the gallery who I know will have been absolutely thrilled to have heard some of the things that you've said there. And I hope, delegates, that we can agree that our guests will be leaving us shortly, that we've been enthused, that we've committed ourselves this week to build strong unions, to fight in the workplace, but most of all to get rid of this rotten Tory government and replace it with the government of Jeremy, Laura, John, and everyone else. So can I thank you on everybody's behalf for the time you've given us today. It's been fantastic.
You're doing a brilliant job. I'm so proud of you being president.
Thank you very much. Their real sacrifice, colleagues, was as they were fighting to defend democracy last night, they missed the pickled eggs that I served up at the General Council dinner. Anyway, right, that takes us now on to General Council Report Section 1, the economy. Delegates, we now are going to take the section on climate change and the environment from page 18. I now wish to explain how I intend to take the climate change debate this afternoon. I'll start by taking Composite Motion 2, Climate Change and a Just Transition, then Motion 6, Securing UK Green Jobs as one debate. Firstly, I will call the mover, seconder and supporters of Composite Motion 2, followed by the mover, seconder of Motion 6. Then I'll open the debate up to other speakers who have indicated they wish to speak. After that, the mover of Composite 2 and the mover of Motion 6 will have the right to reply in that order. We'll then vote on Composite 2 and Motion 6 in that order. Everybody clear? Ready to go? Okay, so I'm now called Composite Motion 2, Climate Crisis and a Just Transition. The General Council support the Composite Motion. So can the following people get ready to speak? It's moved by Unite, seconded by UCU, then supported by the NEU, Prospect, ASLEF and AUE. And I'll take them first. So Unite to move Composite Motion 2.
Well, thanks very much, Mark. What an inspiring team that was. Follow that, as they say. Well, colleagues, I intend to do that. Steve Turner moving Composite 2 on behalf of Unite. Congress, our challenging climate is one of the biggest challenges facing humanity. We're close to irreversibly passing those tipping points in our ecosystems where devastating and extreme weather patterns have become increasingly frequent. Parts of our planet are at growing risk of destructive flooding while others face scorching droughts. We're being battered by hurricanes and tropical storms. Freak weather is becoming so frequent it is now no longer freakish. The Bahamas have been devastated. The heart-rending pictures of carnage caused by Hurricane Dorian are touching us all. Colleagues, the lungs of our ecosystem in the Amazon are ablaze. A deliberate and politically inspired inferno raging and a shameful indictment of our constant craving for more. Congress, climate change is a trade union issue because it's a class issue. And while the rich and the powerful continue to reap the rewards that their destruction of our environment provides them, it's trade unions that must be central to the fight to ensure that it's not working people, here or around the globe, that are left to pay the price. Congress, we need to meet this challenge in a progressive way. We need a new economy and an integrated industrial strategy to underpin the social and industrial transformation we demand towards a sustainable future. And that will only be delivered by a progressive Labour government seizing the opportunities of this challenge. No part of society will be untouched by the transformation required. Energy, transport, our heavy industries, or our homes. Our way of life and how we engage with our planet is going to rapidly and radically change. Of course, there are creative and thoughtful discussions taking place in our movement about how we transition. This composite sets out the work done so far in establishing principles that need to run through this transformation so that workers are its leaders and not its victims. We have a very simple demand: nothing about us without us. And comrades, climate change is about us. It's about the here and now. It's not a fight for our kids, but a fight for us all. As trade unionists, we're at the centre of the debate on just transitioning, energy generation, our auto industry from the combustion engine to hybrid, full battery and hydrogen, and our ceramics, steel and construction industries, from heavy pollutants to sustainable long-term low-carbon producers. And in that debate, we must make sure, and we will ensure, that our members are upskilled or reskilled and transition to new, sustainable local jobs with no loss of pay or undermining of terms and conditions, supporting them, their families, and our wider communities. So, Congress, how proud can we be of our children, knowing that it's their future at stake, taking to the streets just as they did in 2010 in the fight against austerity, to demand the urgent action that's so desperately needed. And as trade unionists, as socialists seeking that better, fairer world, it's our duty to stand proudly alongside them in this fight. And that's why this composite includes the demand that we take whatever solidarity action we can on the 20th of September, the day of the next school strike. Because if we don't, we'll be seen as irrelevant, not as their allies in their fight, and certainly not as an integral part of their future. Because Congress, let's make no mistakes, the stakes are high. Our country is facing a choice that in so many other areas, will have global ramifications. It was Jeremy Corbyn who moved in Parliament that we recognise we're living in a climate emergency. And it's only the election of Jeremy Corbyn as Prime Minister that represents our best chance of securing the industrial and political transformation we need, with the collective voice of working people at its heart. Because the alternative is too dire to think about. So, Congress, let's get active in the fight, busy on the doorstep, and secure the Labour victory we and our planet so desperately deserve. I move.
Thank you very much, Steve. I now call Joe Grady on behalf of the UCU to second the composite. And can I congratulate you, Joe, on your recent election as UCU General Secretary.
Thank you. It is my pleasure to second this motion on behalf of UCU. This motion represents an opportunity which we cannot afford to pass up. The youth climate strike movement is one of the most important and impressive examples of coordinated mass action that the world has seen in recent years. UCU has called for 30 minutes of action by trade unionists in solidarity with the strikes planned on the 20th of September. The original text of our motion, for which I'd like to thank comrades in FE, Nita and Sean, it called for 30-minute workplace stoppage. And as far as our union is concerned, this is the least that we can do to show solidarity with current and future students. Employers in the sectors that we cover are already starting to fall in line and endorse the kind of action that we are calling for. For example, the University's Bristol has promised to allow its staff to walk out with no repercussions on the 20th, and so have several further education colleges. They depend on students as much as students depend on them. This is an issue, and ours is an industry where students and staff have real leverage. Other sectors may not be able to take the same sorts of action, but we have to do whatever we can. We're at a pivotal moment. It is now or never. How will young people forgive us if we let them down precisely when they are building such a serious and concerted movement for change? So let's use this moment to remind them, that the wider public, of what trade unions should know and understand better than anybody else. Climate change shows that capitalism is not working for us. It has no future to offer. And let's start to build an appetite in our movement for the kind of direct solidarity action that has long been inhibited by this country's anti-trade union legislation. We're not in a position yet to call the kind of general climate strike that Greta Thunberg has called for, but we need to take action, and we need to start from somewhere. Whichever sector we work in, we have to do what we can on the 20th. I second.
Thank you, Joe. Call it NEU and then Prospect.
Sally Kincaid from the National Education Union. Congress, President, you've all been so good, I thought I'd better tell you a story. And the story starts, once upon a time, a little girl shouted, "The Emperor is wearing no clothes and the earth is on fire." In the beginning, no one listened. And then the children in Australia shouted, "No, she's right. The Emperor is wearing no clothes and the earth is on fire." Others joined in, and suddenly classrooms were emptying all around the world. Then the children said, "We need to ask the adults for help on the 20th of September. Some of the adults said, "What about our jobs?" And the children replied, "You're clever people. And my granddad found a document, Building a Chieftain Tank and the Alternative, that he wrote with his friends ages ago. So I'm sure we can work it out." Then the adults had ideas. The bakers said, "We'll bring cake, we'll bring pasties." The teachers said, "We'll teach the truth, we'll have protests in schools, we'll change the curriculum for the day, and maybe we'll even get to walk out." The universities say, "We'll march to you, we'll join your protests." And somebody said, "Why don't we set the fire alarms off all around the country?" So some places are setting fire alarms off because the world's on fire. Doncaster Council, Sheffield Council, all the other councils should join in because the world is on fire. So the prison officers said, "What should we do?" So the children said, "Can you lock up the Emperor?" So it said, "No, we can't do that." But the children said, "Actually, we do need help because we're too small to steward our rallies, and the police said we've got to have someone to do it." So the prison officer says, "Yeah, we can do that." And other people said, "Yes, we can do that too." The children, they needed the adults there. And the adults need to work with the children. We need to be demanding a tale. We know this isn't a fairy tale. And we know it doesn't go happy ever after unless we do something. So, colleagues, I've worked out that 2 minutes and 20 seconds you get to go on Twitter with your whole speech. So my final thing to say is, do the maximum you can do something, do encourage your workmates to do the same. We can build the trade union movement and save the earth at the same time, and maybe lock up a couple of emperors on the way. Think big, work with others, do what you do best, and organise. And since I'm a teacher, those of you who plan the best are going to get stickers and badges at the end. But I haven't got enough for all of you. We only have a world to save, So there's no pressure. So let's just get on with it.
Thank you very much, Sally. I call Prospect. And can Aslef be ready next?
President, Congress, Steve Nicholson, Prospect. As a union representing climate scientists as well as energy and environmental workers, we know that the climate change is real and requires urgent action from government and business to tackle this. We also know that this transition to a low-carbon future must work for workers and not lead to further deindustrialisation and unemployment. That's why Prospect has been working alongside our colleagues in GMB, Unite and Unison to promote a just transition for some time now. As a proud nuclear worker, I was delighted that Paul Novak and Sue Ferns, our Senior Deputy General Secretary, agreed to come to Sellafield, which allowed representatives of all the unions on site, GMB, Unite and Prospect, senior leaders of our organisation, to give their views on what a just transition means to the 15,000 employed on the most complex nuclear site in Europe. The nuclear sector throughout the UK provides highly paid, highly skilled jobs with sound reputation and has a crucial part to play in decarbonising our economy. Sellafield Limited employs over 11,000 highly skilled nuclear professionals, an expertise that is second to none in the nuclear industry worldwide, with a direct wage bill of $830 million each year being spent in that community, which is one of the most remote in the UK. If we believe in decarbonisation and we believe in a just transition, then nuclear new build must be back on the agenda. As we strive for a green economy with a low-carbon future and the prospect of 40,000 new, well-paid skilled jobs. The slow progression of nuclear new build in recent years has been a blow to the sector and our hopes of hitting our carbon targets. We must campaign for the progress of nuclear new build at sites that will bring thousands of jobs to areas like Cumbria, North Wales and Suffolk. Having a low-carbon energy policy, with nuclear playing an important role alongside renewables and other technologies, lies at the heart of any economic development strategy for the short and long term post-Brexit, in whatever that form that takes. The real consultation and partnership by the TUC taking forward transition into the nuclear communities is an excellent one. That must be the foundation of any attempt to a successful transition. Congress, please support this motion.
Thank you, Steve. I now call Aslef and then the Artists Union of England, and then we'll move on to motion 6.
Congress, Mark Prenter from Aslef, rising to speak in favour of this composite. Climate change is a real and present danger to working people. We can no longer consider climate change as a matter of a trade-off between jobs and an abstract notion of a greener planet. Climate change will affect every living being on our planet, but you can be sure it is affecting working people and the vulnerable first. But in looking at one of the most important questions of our time, we can find big, bold answers. We must heed the calls of Greta Thunberg and the younger generation. For too long, we've been told the younger generation aren't politically active. They don't care about politics or the world around them. Well, the wonderful young workers we have in this room and amazing work of climate activists dispels that nonsense out of hand. Our movement has done huge amounts in the fight against climate change, but there is always more to do. Jobs will change, the way we work will change, but our struggle for fair pay, job security and decent conditions will not. A just transition to a low-carbon economy must have trade unions at its heart to ensure working people are not left behind, but are at the forefront of new industries. Training for the new opportunities that technological advancements will bring, investment and planning focused on the communities that face the biggest threats to their industries. Planning and an industrial strategy centred on green, efficient infrastructure, including transport. We need electrification of the railway. where at present I drive a diesel train that is so inefficient it only runs at approximately 6 miles per gallon per engine. Climate change has been one of the free market's biggest failures. Dealing with it must be one of the trade union movement's biggest successes. Let's make it so. Conference, please support this composite.
Thank you, Mark. I call the Artists Union of England.
Jill Eastland, Artists Union, first-time delegate and speaker. We fully support climate justice and the commitment to a just transition. I want to focus, however, on asking you all to think about how you will support the request from Greta Thunberg and Youth Strike for Climate for adults to join them in mass action on September the 20th. They said, "We feel a lot of adults haven't quite understood that we young people won't hold off the climate crisis ourselves. Sorry if this is inconvenient for you, but this is not a single generation job. It's humanity's job." And young people have been demonstrating their concern and commitment here at Congress and coming to talk to us outside this building. Climate change is a frightening and urgent issue for them and should be to us. This is an important issue for all workers. As Jeremy Corbyn said earlier, the destruction of the climate is also a class issue. We have learnt from the shock doctrine that when a community or a country faces a crisis, such as an extreme weather event, it's the poorest and ordinary workers who are hit the hardest. And their crisis is used as an excuse for exploitation, for the richest to become richer, and for inequality to grow. Scientists are unanimously telling us that this is imminent on an unprecedented scale, and that we need to act urgently now. Our young people have given us this opportunity to step up and support them now, and to show them that trade unions matter and can act effectively. We have collectively put their futures in danger, and we need to act collectively now to support them. We need to be courageous and imaginative in thinking of ways to support them, to turn the agreement of this motion into something bolder in the ways in which we work with it and disseminate it in our unions and our workplaces. We don't want to be left in the position where we are merely participating in something like an online survey that we could do any other day of the year. We want to be visible and strong and proud in the support of our young people who are leading the way. We have only ever won anything through bold and courageous actions. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jill. So we're now, as I explained, going to move now to the movers of motion 6 and the seconders. That's the GMB, seconded by UCU. And then I'm going to call Unison and PCS, and then we're going to move to the votes. Tim.
Good afternoon, Congress. Tim Roach, GMB, moving motion 6. I don't need to tell you, Congress, that we live in uncertain political times. As school children strike, workers occupy their failing yards, and people take to the streets, we see that failure writ large across all communities, regions and nations of the UK on energy and climate change. It's a tale of the economic elite ignoring all moral imperatives in the interest of a broken economic system, not people or the planet. It's a story of willful neglect of communities that once drove the economy of our country. It's a chronicle of economic mismanagement, missed opportunities, and a fundamental lack of a principled vision. That means the much-touted green jobs revolution has passed working-class communities by. Congress, it shouldn't be seen as controversial to want, nor is it beyond our collective ability to deliver an energy solution that reduces emissions, creates decent jobs, keeps the lights on and the economy moving, and doesn't fleece the average bill payer. Instead, we see an energy and supply chain track record dominated by overseas companies, poorly paid, casualised employment, a UK offshore wind industry carved up by Far East finance, Saudi sovereign wealth funds, and a state-backed European competitors. All the while other countries bend the rules to keep their work contracts on their shores, we bend over backwards to send jobs overseas, and not just on energy, on shipbuilding too. If these rules can't be made to work for our workers in the UK, then we need new rules. I'll give you one example, Congress, Fife, a proud area which once supported 20,000 manufacturing jobs during the North Sea oil and gas boom, see yards lay empty and workers laid off as the community begs for the scraps from the table of a £2 billion EDF project. The bulk of the wind jackets our members will see from their living room windows will be manufactured in Indonesia for an Italian contractor and transferred 7,000 miles on dirty diesel-burning ships back to the Fife coast, where local people will pay for them through their hiked-up electricity bills. Conference, this strategy is negligent at best, vindictive and cruel at its worst. The communities decimated by Thatcher and since blighted by the explosion of insecure work and the Amazon economy are crying out for the chance to make things again, to once again feel the pride of being the engine room of the nation, to lead the green industrial revolution. Good, sustainable energy jobs are a solution to so many of the different challenges we face in the modern world. They're how a proud energy union like the GMB remains a proud energy union for the next 130 years, just as we have for the last. Retrofitting and insulation of people's homes reduces emissions, lowers bills, and can create skilled unionised jobs. New nuclear energy would bring down bills, reduce our carbon footprint, and create thousands of good construction and steel jobs, and crucially, underpinned by a standard rate for the job, finally ending the undercutting and exploitation of migrant labour. Investment in green gases like hydrogen would help decarbonisation of the gas system while preserving infrastructure and securing gas jobs for the next generation. And a progressive tax system that funds the transition to net zero, ending the regressive green poll tax the poorest pay through their energy bills. At present, the reality for our members looks very different. We see Harland and Wolff, we see Bifab, we see Appledore, we see Camel Laird, yards closing, jobs going, skills we will never, ever see returned. These things don't happen by accident, Conference. They are a product of a lack of political will and a political class that has let down working people time and time again. Congress, the potential exists now to unite Green New Dealers and the Labour movement around the economic and just climate necessities of tackling climate change. This debate matters to each and every one of us, to every worker, to every home, to every classroom, and to every community. I'm a dad who wants the planet in a fit shape for my kids and their kids too. And I'm a General Secretary who wants proud energy workers to have safe, secure and skilled work. Congress, support this motion and we can have both. Thank you.
Thank you, Tim. Call on UCU to second.
I'm proud to say that for years UCU has been leading the way on climate change. We helped found the Greener Jobs Alliance and the trade union Clean Air Network. Our policy opposes fracking and airport expansion. We know the effects of climate change are on the UK economy. It reinforces the inequalities that already exist. Dealing with climate change requires planning and concerted action, not short-sighted competition or exploitation. Just as we understand and realise that the rotten neoliberal economic model ruins our sectors, we also see that it ruins our planet. That is why today I called for a Green New Deal for the UK economy. Now, I'm the daughter of a former miner. When I was born in 1984, he was on strike. I know firsthand the kind of damage that's done when extractive industries are attacked and dismantled without any planning to help the workers in them. Right-wing politicians and big corporations have despoiled the economy in exactly the same way they despoil the environment. But we're already seeing things done the right way in other countries. In Spain, coal miners' unions have agreed a settlement with the Spanish government whereby inefficient mines will be closed, but the investment will be put into ensuring work needed to make mines safe will go to former miners. There will also be new jobs created in infrastructure and sustainable energy that again will go to former miners. When we take action on the 20th, we shouldn't just be calling for governments and corporations to sit up and take notice. We should be naming the enemies and obstacles that stand in our way, exactly as my comrade from the GMB has just done. And we should be making ambitious, robust demands for a new system. And that is why I'm seconding this motion.
Thank you, Joe. So I'm now going to call Unison and PCS, and then we move to the votes.
President, Congress, Tracy Wainwright, Unison and an energy worker, speaking in support of the composite. Congress, let's be clear, we don't need any persuading that climate change is real, dangerous and destructive. We know that there are no jobs on a dead planet. And if the transition to net zero is not just, it is its workers and their families who will most likely suffer the worst consequences. It is for that reason we in Unison, alongside our sister energy unions, have worked so hard to come up with solutions that will deliver net zero by 2050. Solutions that are achievable in a democratic society. Solutions that can work and solutions that won't jeopardise the very progress we need to achieve. We fully support those who raise awareness of climate change, but at the same time we need practical solutions. Congress, energy workers don't want charity and they don't need charity. We know that we will have to harness the skills of every energy worker and many thousands more in the future if we are to get anywhere near net zero. Good planning which takes account of the national interest and sound investment in the right areas should ensure no energy workers left stranded by efforts to decarbonise energy. For our members want productive work and they want to be in the forefront of decarbonising energy. I want the guarantees and substance, not good intentions and aspirations. We have been clear that a strategy to achieve net zero by 2050 is required urgently, and we recognise that it will require place in the industry and the wider economy on an almost warlike footing, such as the magnitude of change needed. Congress, please do not underestimate the 2050 target. Getting to net zero by 2050 is not by any means certain, and we are already falling behind the necessary trajectory. It is a huge undertaking that will impact on citizens and workers across the UK. People we need to keep on board and not persuaded by arguments from the right wing that climate change is imagined. Congress, we've been calling for three things to happen which need to begin with immediate effect and allow us to get to net zero. Congress, we can hit net zero and we can do it in such a way to keep our members fully engaged and employed. We can do it by keeping the public on board and delivering the changes in a positive and supported way. We can make the transition just and we can lead the debate. Congress, please support.
Thank you, Tracy. PCS.
Thanks, Mark. Comrades, Gordon Roundtree, PCS, supporting composite 2. In June this year, PCS declared a climate emergency on behalf of our members. This was made in recognition of last year's report by the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, which called for a rapid and radical transformation of our economies, and also because we were inspired by Extinction Rebellion and the student strikers. Now, if Trump and the other climate change deniers weren't
convinced by the student strikers. They only need to look at what's been happening around the world this year. And I think, as Steve mentioned earlier on, it's not just something freakish now, it's something that's happened very, very regularly. The summer of 2019 has been beset by broken records on temperatures. We've had the hottest July on record. We've had an unprecedented number of wildfires, not just in California and places like Australia, but in the Arctic, with the most severe in Alaska and Siberia, along with flooding there as well. And only last week, we saw the devastating impact of Hurricane Dorian on the Bahamas, which was made bigger, wetter, and more deadlier by global warming. The burning of the Amazon rainforest is the most graphic and violent display of the corporate greed that is fueling climate change. Comrades from the Brazilian Trade Union Federation have said that this attack on the Amazon, the environmental policies that help protect it by the Bolsonaro government, is clearly linked to the interests of Brazilian mining companies and large agricultural businesses. Comrades, tackling climate change is not about political will, it's ideological. The same policies that have led to stagnant wages, zero-hour contracts, food banks and extreme inequality are the same that is preventing serious action on climate change. Profits for the few, generated by privatisation, liberalisation and deregulation policies. Capitalists look to the market to solve all their problems, but the idea that market signals will somehow lead us out of this crisis is total fantasy. We need a national plan across the whole economy, coupled with a just transformative transition for all workers to rapidly decarbonise our economy by 2030. Some may say it's not achievable. We believe it's not an option. School students have clearly said, as been mentioned earlier, that they're in fear of their future, and it'll be them and the generations after them that will have to deal with the consequences of any further inaction by ourselves. They're now reaching out to the Labour movement to join them on the streets on the 20th of September in the biggest mobilisation yet on climate change. They recognise the difficulties for us as trade unions to take action, but we're currently looking in PCS what we've got planned in things across the union. In London, for example, we'll be joining our members that were in yesterday in Bays, the very department that's charged with looking after workers' rights and the environment.
Can you wind up?
So Congress, climate change is a trade union social issue. The free market economy that Trump and the Tories and big business put their face in will do nothing to address the problem. We believe it's therefore incumbent on us to take the lead in making a case for radical action to avoid the independent catastrophe for working class people now and in the future. So please support.
Thank you, Gordon, and can I thank all those speakers? That was an excellent debate. So I'm now going to move to the vote. So first of all, call the vote on motion 2. All those in favour of Composite 2, please show. Thank you. Any against? That's unanimously carried. And I'll now move to the motion 6. All those in favour of motion 6? Thank you. Any against? That's overwhelmingly carried. Thank you very much, Congress. Colleagues, just to say that that was a really powerful debate on a very real and immediate issue. I just want to draw Congress's attention to a campaign called The Truth About Zane. And Zane's dad is with us at Congress this week. Zane was killed as a result of an environmental mismanagement when a water supply to his house was poisoned by toxins from a nearby landfill during a flood. Zane Gambola died tragically at the age of 7. I'd like to urge everybody to support the Truth About Zane campaign because in such a tragic way it tells us what's at stake. Solidarity to Zane's dad who's sitting at the front, and can we show him our support, Congress? Okay, so we're now going to move to motion 8, paragraph 1.8 and motion 8, public ownership of energy. Just before I call the moving speakers, can I just tell you, Congress, that I've just personally received an email from the Bays Department who have just emailed me to say that they have now conceded that the London living wage is going to be paid to all our strikers. We're in talks with them now, but Andrea Leadsom has put out a press release saying it was a priority for her to sort this dispute out. I just want to make it clear that dispute has been won by those brave women and men that you saw up in the platform earlier this week. And if they can win the London living wage as support workers by going out on strike, it should really give us all hope that we can win these disputes. Everyone, particular to our health strikers up there and our Harland and Wolff strikers. So congratulations and thanks to Congress for all the support that you showed. So we now move to public ownership of energy, which is Composite Motion 8. The General Council support the motion, and I will be calling Sue Ferns from the General Council during the debate to explain the General Council's position. But I now want to ask the BFAWU to move the motion. It will be seconded by the FBU. I'll then call Sue Ferns from the General Council, and Prospect have also indicated that they wish to speak, so if they can all get ready. Move to the Bakers Union to move motion 8.
Chair, Platform Delegate Ronnie Draper, Bakers Food and Allied Workers Union, moving the motion. Along with other unions here in the UK and internationally, the BFAW gives its 100% support to the rising levels of protest and activism led by school students concerned about climate change. My union also agrees with all the sentiments that have been expressed in the past motions regarding the climate crisis and the need for just transition. The Bakers Food and Allied Workers Union acknowledges that unions in the energy sector have a number of concerns about the direction and impact of energy policy. And this resolution, we believe, addresses those concerns. We also support the Labour Party's commitment to bring energy transmission and distribution networks back into the public ownership and to set up a national energy agency. For years, we were told that privatisation and liberalisation of energy markets would clear the way for an energy transition to renewable energy like wind and solar. EU policy is explicit in this respect. The need to protect climate decarbonisation has been used like a political water cannon to break up and flush away public energy systems. But it's becoming increasingly clear that the current approach to energy and climate policy is a shambolic. First of all, it is failing workers and communities. As the BIFAB struggle in Fife clearly illustrates, jobs in the renewable sector have mostly failed to materialise. The offshore wind industry is dominated by non-UK companies who enjoy generous subsidies but perform most of the work outside of the UK. Second, the current policy is also failing to reduce emissions fast enough. The UK and the EU are struggling to meet the 2020 targets, and without a major shift in policy, comrades, the 2030 targets will not be met. Since 2012, governments have turned away from the generous feed-in tariff subsidies systems towards more competitive bidding regimes where the winner takes all. This bidding process has driven down contract prices. Investors then see diminishing profit margins and lose interest. Today, even middle-of-the-road policy experts have come to accept that the current climate targets and high-risk energy markets are simply not compatible with each other. By 2025, all of the UK's coal-fired power stations are expected to be closed, eliminating 13.5 gigawatts of generation capacity. Another 9.5 gigawatts of nuclear capacity is expected to be taken offline by 2030, and the rest of the nuclear industry by 2035. These are massive cuts, comrades, to our generating capacity. Under private ownership, ensuring this massive growth in generating capacity will mean higher costs, more and more subsidies, and further erosion of our domestic manufacturing capacity. Research from Public Services International's research unit, the Transnational Institute in Amsterdam, and Trade Unions for Energy Democracy in New York has shown that public renewable power is less expensive than private, which not only faces higher interest rates and other costs, but also relies on various subsidies and long-term power purchase agreements in order to guarantee its profits for the investors. Public ownership not only eliminates those unnecessary costs and provides cheaper power for users, but also allows us to address domestic skills deficits. Under public ownership and a planned approach, we can make use of the skills we have at present, while we develop the new skills we need for a vibrant, thriving sector in the future. Labour's current commitment to reclaiming transmission and distribution is an important step, but it can't be seen as a policy endgame. A comprehensive reclaiming of energy to public control and a planned integrated approach to energy transition under democratic control will allow us to achieve the scale of change required in the time that we have available. Such an approach can also make good on the efforts of energy unions and the TUC to make just transition a reality for workers in energy-intensive industries and to ensure union protections for workers in the green economy. I move.
Thank you, Ronnie. FBU to second.
President, Congress, Ben Selby, the Fire Brigade Union. The FBU is proud to support and second this Bakers Union motion on the public ownership of energy. Our union believes that public ownership of wide sectors of the economy is essential to preventing dangerous climate change. This also needs to be coupled with the repealing of all anti-trade union laws so workers can rightly defend our planet. We've fought for decades to preserve our own industry as a publicly owned, publicly run fire and rescue service against those who have promoted privatisation. In 2012, the FBU successfully brought a motion to this conference for public ownership of the banks, part of our answer to the economic downturn and to austerity. Taking over the banks also has a climate dimension. Finance will be necessary for the kind of infrastructure to provide the low-carbon energy and transport systems we need. In 2014, the FBU published a pamphlet on the energy sector and again calling for public ownership and democratic control. We were trying to make the key argument. We can't leave the decisions about our energy system in the hands of private profiteers who have no reason to switch to low-carbon energy if they can still make a profit from pollution. Switching to renewables needs decision-making in the hands of the state to oversee it and in the hands of the workers who know the industry best and can push it in a more climate-friendly direction. A similar case can be made for transport. There are dozens of reasons to nationalise the railways: the cost of travel, the delays, the lack of planning and the profiteering from our misery. But an integrated, publicly owned transport system will also be more environmentally friendly. Congress, this year, climate change has rightly come back on the political agenda after years being in the long grass. Sisters and brothers, we have sisters and brothers. The school student and Extinction Rebellion protests have forced climate change onto the public stage once again, and us trade unionists should be proud of that fact. Another reason is that the science is only getting clearer. The Westminster government's UK climate projections in 2018 found solid evidence for climate change in the UK. The average temperature over the most recent decade has risen 0.8 degrees and is warmer by 0.8 degrees than what it was in 1960. 9 of the 10 warmest years have occurred since 2002. And during that time, firefighters have been out dealing with floods and wildfires right across the UK. So, comrades, for these reasons, we want the TUC to support action on climate change, which means bringing the main energy firms under public ownership and democratic control. I support.
Thank you, colleague. I now call Sue Ferns on behalf of the General Council to explain our position.
Thank you, President Congress. Sue Ferns stating the General Council's position on motion 8, which is to support with an explanation. As we agreed at the Congress in 2017, the General Council believes that public ownership of energy could have an important part to play in delivering our future energy needs. It could certainly help in delivering the infrastructure investment we need to deliver the growth in low carbon and renewables that we all want to see. However, as we affirmed at Congress last year, we've always been clear that decisions about public ownership must be taken in full and proper consultation with workers and unions in the sector. What we want to achieve is a safe, reliable, decarbonised energy system that provides good unionised jobs. There's no doubt that greater state intervention will help, but it will not in itself be sufficient to deliver this outcome. Energy is a complex sector, and the growth of the renewables, welcome as it is, makes it even more technically demanding. Yet there's already a workforce crisis caused by a combination of skill shortages, an ageing workforce, and a chronic lack of diversity. This must be addressed as a matter of urgency. It should also be noted that all retail and customer service operations are under tremendous pressure, and that although the Big Six do honour their obligations to vulnerable customers, many of the new entrants do not. And Congress, let's not assume that so-called green employers are all good employers. Right now, many of them don't even recognise unions. So there is a bigger picture to consider, and as ever, next steps in the energy transition must be informed by our industrial expertise. Thank you.
Thank you, Sue, for explaining our position. Prospect?
Congress, President, Craig Marshall, Prospect, speaking to motion 8 and very much welcoming the General Council's statement. Prospect has generally avoided taking a direct position on the question of renationalisation of the electricity supply industry. We've acknowledged that the current market arrangements are not working and have also been critical of the level of profit made in some parts of the industry, particularly within networks and parts of the renewables sector. Along with Unite, GMB and Unison, we co-authored a submission to the energy regulator Ofgem in April 2018, which was highly critical of both liberalised energy markets and the existing framework for network regulation. At the same time, Prospect members within the industry have been ambivalent about the idea of renationalisation. The most recent comprehensive survey of members' views was run in 2017, and the results showed that whilst more than half the correspondents supported more state intervention, only about a third supported outright renationalisation. In line with this, at our 2018 Prospect National Conference, delegates passed an energy motion calling for a stronger role for the state in UK energy markets, whilst leaving open the question of what that should be. In general, the public position we have taken is to argue that the outcomes are more important than the questions of ownership. What matters is that we achieve safe, reliable and decarbonised energy systems which provide high-quality employment opportunities and meet the needs of customers. Public ownership may well be one way to achieve this, but it also may be possible to achieve this under a privatised system that is better regulated. Public ownership should not automatically be seen as a panacea for all the problems facing the energy industry. We should resist the temptation to automatically see renationalisation as the answer every time an issue occurs in the sector. There are huge investment and workforce challenges to be dealt with that renationalisation will not by itself solve. Colleagues, please support the motion with what the General Council have said in their statement. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Craig. So there's been no opposition, so I'm going to move straight to the vote. Can I ask all those in favour of motion 8 to show? Thank you. Any against? I think that's unanimous. Thank you very much, Congress. Congress, it's now time to celebrate the work and achievements of all those who bring the benefits of trade unionism to tens of thousands of workers each day of the year, our workplace union representatives. Firstly, we're going to watch a short video that celebrates their work before the General Secretary will then present the winners with their awards.
On the morning of the first day of strike action, I couldn't sleep the night before. I've never been so excited with anything work related ever. When I was told I had won the award, the emotion was overwhelming. I actually cried and had to have a hug. We had spent many weeks preparing our t-shirts, our placards, our whistles, anything that made a noise. It was dark, it was cold, it was wet, but you know what, the enthusiasm and the belief around this picket line and this strike was huge. It was pride, it was tears, there was happiness, it was so much wrapped into one. Every single person that took part in the strike, every single person in this branch and beyond, I think it will instill a sense of belief in all our members forevermore that your actions can be counted and recognised.
It's just a big family that we are as volunteers. If we can make a little bit of difference through volunteering, then why not? To receive this award, it really did show me that, you know, all hard work and it does pay off. I think that there's so many things going on in the world at the moment that kind of puts a wedge and a drive between people. And to realise that doing such a small act can actually bring you together is a massive thing. It's enabled me to prove to people that just because we're on a council estate, we're not that stereotype that people actually put on us. I do it for the sake of other people and really to just say, look, this is what we've achieved, because it's not just me that's achieved this. There's so many other people that have had an input into making me the person I am.
I do love working in the learning curve more than anything. I'd love to do it full time. When I got the phone call to say I'd won this award, I was over the moon. I was so excited. Learning, it's great for everybody. One of our drivers, we sat with him for hours and hours on end, and then I watched him receive Workplace Learner of the Year, which was an amazing feeling. It was like as though it were my child receiving something like the gold medal at the Olympics. It's like giving them a bit of confidence that they can do it at whatever age they are. You're proud that you've been able to help somebody. I want people to achieve whatever they want to achieve. Go for it. We will help you as much as we possibly can.
I fight for the voice of the women to be heard in their work environments and in our communities, and as a woman ourselves to be recognised. When I won the award this year, I felt shock, and then I felt overwhelmed and humbled. The reason that I think I became very, very active around women's issues is my union is made up of 1.3 million members. Over 1 million of them are women. What's happened to me has given me the grounding to be able to understand and talk to other people, knowing that you're not alone, you're not by yourself. Other women are going to be there helping you along that journey. We can do something. United together, we can change things.
Everything should be seen and campaigned for through a health and safety lens. After the accident that happened in my school all those years ago, I kind of made a promise to myself that if I felt things were wrong, I would never again not speak about them. And health and safety is life or death. It's something that everybody should be concerned with, no matter what the sacrifices might be. When things are wrong, you need to speak out and say they're wrong. And I ended up applying that lesson to all sorts of other things that became campaigns in my school and in other schools. If it wasn't for the support of the union, I don't think I would still be in teaching today. I can have the worst day possible and I will go to a union meeting after school, and it sounds really cheesy to say it, but it's like being with family.
Congress, I'm sure you'll agree, it's always inspiring to see our lay reps in action, and we've got the best seat here because we can see the reaction on everybody's faces when they're watching themselves on the video. So it now gives me great pleasure to say that our General Secretary, Francis, is going to present the winners with their awards, and I'll introduce them individually. So this year's Safety Rep Award goes to Jenny Cooper of the National Education Union. Congratulations, Jenny. And the winner of this year's Organising Award in recognition of the achievements of the Glasgow Equal Pay campaigners is Lynn Marie O'Hara. Congratulations, Lynn Marie, absolutely amazing. And the winner of this year's Learning a Rep Award is Susan Mann of Unite. Well done, Susan. Fantastic. And the winner of the Young Members Award is USDO activist Christina Di Stefano. Well done, Christina. Fantastic stuff. And the final award is for the Women's Go badge, and this year's recipient from Unison is Pat Heron.
Not just for me, it's for all the phenomenal women out there. Our day is coming. We will be on every top table, raising women's voices.
Well done, Pat. Fantastic. And Congress, can I just ask you to note, very much in line with what Pat just said to you there, this is the first year where all of the awards have gone to women, so that's absolutely fantastic. So can I thank all our wonderful recipients, and can I ask Congress to agree? I call paragraph 6.3 agreed. Can we move on? Thank you. So delegates, continuing now with section 3 of the General Council report, Respect and a Voice at Work, we now turn to the equality section, and this is from page 34, and it is my intention in this section, wherever I can, to call all of the speakers because of the importance of the subjects. So to get it all in, I'll ask everyone to respect the timings of their speeches if you can. So I now call motion 37, Smashing the Gender Pay Gap, a vague sense of shame is not enough. The General Council support the motion. It'll be moved by Unison, seconded by the FDA, and then I intend to call the CWU and UCU. So if those people can be ready at the front, and can I ask Unison to now move motion 37. Good afternoon.
Thank you, President. Good afternoon, Congress. Lillian Macer, Unison, moving motion 37. Working women have waited far too long for fairness in pay and equality at work. 50 years from the Equal Pay Act, it is an injustice that women in the UK continue to suffer a gender pay gap of almost 15%. It is therefore both necessary and just that we in this room campaign to ensure that mandatory publication of action plans that make a real difference in eradicating this appalling injustice. We need a gender pay gap action plan that considers all aspects of the world of work, from pre-employment to retirement, and the role of education and skills, employment services support, and in social security. However, Congress, Unison believes that this on its own will not be enough to address the years of gender discrimination. It doesn't do enough to ensure that we address the imbalance of power, which means that women continue to be discriminated against. Congress, the sad reality is that women remain heavily represented in occupations which tend to be low paid and undervalued. More than 1 in 3 women work in low-paid occupations such as cleaning, catering, admin, retail and care. Compared to 1 in 5, women are more likely to have caring responsibilities and are more likely to work in part-time employment. 4 in 10 women work in part-time compared to 1 in 10 men. Part-time work remains poorly paid and is associated with in-work poverty, particularly for lone parents. Women are also more likely to be in zero-hours contracts, temporary contracts, and more likely to feel that their job is insecure. On top of that, women are twice as likely to be subject to bullying and harassment. Over half of all women have experienced some forms of sexual harassment at work. And that number, Congress, rises to nearly 2/3 of women aged between 18 and 24. And Congress, if that were not bleak enough as a picture, there continues to be a severe motherhood penalty across our labour market. A staggering 1 in 9 mothers experience pregnancy and maternity discrimination, resulting in them having to leave their jobs. Poor employment practice, poor paternal leave policies and unequal pay means taking time out of the workplace to have children remains a significant driver in the pay gap. Congress, while there are a number of factors that influence the gender pay gap, it must be recognised that undervaluation of women's work is at its heart. Closing the gap must therefore involve increasing the pay of these low-paid female-dominated occupations. It is a simple point, but one that gets too little attention in the debate around equal pay. So I'll say it again. Raising women's pay closes the gender pay gap. This motion rightly recognises the Dagenham and Ford machinists of 50 years ago, and I want to pay tribute to more recent times. As we heard in the organising award from Lynn Marie, Glasgow women this year have the settlement of their equal pay campaign that they launched a number of years ago. They fought hard, they fought long, but they took to the streets, and as convener in Unison Scotland, I was proud to stand beside and walk beside Lisa Marie and her colleagues, 8,000 Glasgow women, standing up for their rights and winning. Congress with trade union members earning 22% more than women who are not in a trade union. Organising women should be our priority. Raising women's pay reduces the pay gap, and unions raise pay. Congress, it's that simple. We needed to extend the collective sectoral bargaining arrangements for public sector workers to the private and third sector. And we need to improve the terms and conditions of many women in our membership now. Ultimately, the gender pay gap will only be reduced when we, the trade union movement, organise and make demands. As the Glasgow Women's Strike shows, when women come together and take action, we win. I move, please support.
Thank you, Lillian. FTA to second.
Good afternoon, President and Congress. Fiona Eadie moving the amendment from FDA and seconding the motion. The gender pay gap is a scandal. It is especially shameful if you are a BME woman, an LGBT+ woman, or a disabled woman. The pay gap you face is even more significant than that of your white, cisgender, and heterosexual or able-bodied peers. The FDA wants employers to report pay gaps for Black and ethnic minority workers, LGBT+ workers, and disabled workers. And this data will allow for better targeted campaigning to reduce wage inequality across the country. Our members are senior public servants who work in the civil service, the health service, and in social care. In the NHS in particular, almost 80% of the workforce is female, but yet representation of women, and particularly of BME women at senior levels, remains not at all representative of the workforce as a whole or of the communities in which they are anchored. Basic targets like 50-50 representation of women at board level by 2020 will not only not be met, in some organisations, barely 1 percentage point of improvement has been made. Decisions by boards can affect tens of thousands of people and entire communities. They should reflect the places in which they are situated and the staff who work there, yet this is rarely the case. Recent civil service evidence suggests that the BME pay gap is even worse than the gender pay gap, and the senior civil service still has significant improvements ahead if it truly wishes to reflect the country it serves. MIP will therefore continue to work jointly with FDA to ensure that public servants of all kinds achieve gender parity and pay equality across the board. Thank you.
Thank you, Fiona. I call on the CWU, then UCU.
Good afternoon, President, Congress, Michelle Reid-Hay, the Communication Workers Union supporting. I'd like to just share a little bit of my employment history with yourself. I used to work in the oil industry in the 1990s when it was really quite affluent and quite good at the time, but as you'll know now, it's not at the moment. I used to work in an oil company. Now, in the oil company, you used to get a little bit of a bonus every year from the employer that you worked for. Now, that bonus was either a golf trip to the Algarve or to watch rugby with the nations to follow Scotland. Now, for about 2 years, I wondered why I didn't get invited to these two things, because I was the only female within the financial department I worked for. So after 2 years, I sat in a board meeting and asked I would be staying at the Balmoral in Edinburgh for 2 nights with some spending money while you guys are going to Glen Eagles, I think you are going to this year. Now, to say that I got silence and a bit of a few words not spoken directly at me, and my boss suddenly turned around and said, Michelle, which weekend would suit you? So I would just like to say the reason why I'm sharing this with you is because I spoke up for myself. So I think if Monica or Annette or Mary gets together with the rest of their females and goes and has a meeting with their manager and says just the one question would be, why do I not get paid the same as? I'll just say, for example, Dave, Bob, John, Sadiq, anybody, why? Now the answer, he might not give you one, but at least it's actually in his head now that you know that you are getting paid slightly different. Now, the reason, again, I'm actually mentioning this is because in the motion, it says that publishing gaps will not be enough on its own to bring about real change. But you can bring about real change. You can. So I'd like you to support this motion. Thank you.
Thank you, Michelle, and the UCU.
Hi, President and Congress, thank you. Victoria Shronry, UCU, UCL branch. So 50 years have passed since the Dagenham Ford machinists went on strike. Many of us know about the point in history that took place due to the women making a stand. It is, however, been 43 years since the Grunwick dispute, which was led by a group of Asian women who were demanding respect and support for a wage rise. Different points in history, both were wanting change on gender and pay. Ask yourself the reason. Why is it easier to remember one and not the other? It is because the voice of black women is indeed invisible in the context of gender. Most people, including us, as union colleagues, see all the women as white, all the blacks are men, and the rest of us as brave. You can see that as a quote from a book which came out in the late 70s. We speak about narrowing the pay gap for between women and men. However, the narrowing is based on stats on white women. The situation for black women is not good. Black women are at the bottom of the pay ladder, and the gap is vast, 19% less than white workers. FE members have been taking action as part of their pay dispute to end the abuse of casual contracts that contribute to the gender pay gap, and have been making gains. Discrimination in the workplace is rife. Black women have to navigate explicit and passive bullying, clumsy stereotyping, and devise and implement strategies at speed just to cope. We must address this through an intersectional lens of gender, race, and class to ensure that change happens. Improvements are not possible unless there is a fundamental shift in how race and racism are understood. Talent and ambition must not be thwarted by discrimination. We do need to demand the end of the gender pay gap, which includes casualisation, hence our strike ballot that opened for higher education yesterday. Please support the motion. Thank you.
Thank you, Victoria, and for all our speakers in that debate. I now move to the vote. All those in favour of motion 37, please show. Thank you. Any against? That's carried unanimously. I now call composite motion 10, ILO Convention on Workplace Sexual Harassment. The General Council support the motion. Been moved by CSP, seconded by NAS UWT, then supported by the UCU, and I intend to call Equity and the CWU. So if all speakers could be ready, that'd be great. And call on CSP to move.
President, Congress, Jill Taylor from the Chartered Society of Physiotherapy proposing motion 38. Sexual harassment has no place in the workplace, but every day people across the UK are sexually harassed at work. 1 in 2 women have been sexually harassed at work, and 2 in 3 LGBT plus workers have experienced sexual harassment in the workplace. For staff employed in healthcare, this is a regular occurrence. The Unison It's Never OK report showed that nearly 1 in 10 healthcare workers reported being sexually harassed in 2018. This includes verbal abuse, offensive banter, suggestive gestures, and being leered at. Almost a quarter of healthcare staff reporting harassment said they had been sexually assaulted, with some having been the victim of criminal offences such as rape, upskirting, indecent exposure, or inappropriate touching. Nearly a third of those who'd been sexually harassed said it had occurred on a regular basis, and more than 1 in 10 weekly or daily. Almost over 50% of the acts of sexual harassment were reported as being committed by immediate colleagues. This has resulted in healthcare workers isolating themselves from colleagues, self-harming or contemplating suicide, whilst others have been driven to leave their jobs. But shockingly, at the moment, there is no legal duty on the employers to take proactive action to prevent this from happening. Our current laws rely on the individuals reporting incidents. The figures show that putting the onus on victims to report does not work. Of those workers who reported being victims of harassment, more than a quarter kept quiet about it, and only 1 in 5 reported it to human resources or their managers. Reasons for not reporting included the belief that nothing would be done, that they would be dismissed as oversensitive, or that the perpetrator would retaliate. Therefore, the CSP welcomes the TUC's This Is Not Working campaign, and we are proud to put our name to it. This campaign demands a new, easily enforceable legal duty, requiring employers to take all reasonable steps to protect workers from sexual harassment and victimisation. It should not be down to the individual to prevent and manage their harassment alone. In the same way the health and safety measures protect us from risks at work, employers need to protect us from harassment, whether it comes from a colleague or a third party, such as a customer, client, or patient. Congress, the world is waking up to the need to tackle violence and harassment in the workplace. In June, in its centenary year, the ILO passed the new Convention on Violence and Harassment in the World of Work. This is the first new convention agreed by the International Labour Conference for 8 years, showing the international recognition of the urgent need to tackle violence and harassment in the workplace. Shockingly, more than 1 in 3 countries do not have specific laws against workplace sexual harassment. Therefore, the convention is to be welcomed, and it requires governments, including our own, to take measures to protect workers from violence and harassment, especially women. We now need to get the UK government to ratify the convention and put the standards and protections into practice so that we create better, safer, decent working environments for all workers, despite gender. We have a responsibility to hold the government to account and put pressure on them to ratify the convention as soon as possible. Congress, harassment should not be a fact of working life. It is time our government did something about it. Let's work together to get government to introduce a new duty on reporting and to ratify and implement the new ILO convention. Please, I urge you support this motion.
Thank you, Jill. NASUWT to second.
President, Congress, Patrick Roach, NASUWT, the Teachers Union, very proud to be seconding Composite 10 on the ILO Convention on Workplace Sexual Harassment. Congress, the right to go to work without fear of sexual harassment, sexual violence and abuse is a fundamental right. But in the centenary year of the ILO, ending workplace sexual harassment still remains one of the biggest challenges faced by our trade union movement. NASUWT research indicates that in schools and colleges, women teachers regularly experience sexual harassment by colleagues, managers, parents, and pupils. Yet there's widespread reluctance to report harassment for fear of reprisal, being ostracised and victimised. Colleagues, we know the problem, and we know that it's down to us to demand change to the culture of workplaces and to bring an end to these unacceptable practices. Congress, this is an issue for all our unions and for all our members, women and men. And I'm proud of the action of our trade union movement in championing equality. And I'm also proud of the work of the NASUWT in making schools and colleges safer places for women teachers, including the NASUWT's legal victory this year against the outrageous and deplorable practice of upskirting, where a former pupil was convicted for taking and distributing sexual images of teachers. And I'm proud of our continuing campaign to change the law to bring an end to this vile and degrading form of abuse in schools. But Congress, while such victories are important, we also need a legal framework that secures the right to go to work free from sexual harassment and for employers to be proactive in this area. Congress, it was our trade union movement that fought for and won action to outlaw discrimination at work. And it's our trade union movement that must now lead the fight for and win action to outlaw sexual harassment, abuse and sexual violence in the workplace. So let's commit to ensuring that ending sexual harassment doesn't take another 100 years. Commit to concerted campaigning during the ILO's 16 days of activism against gender-based violence by campaigning together between the 25th of November and the 10th of December. And let's redouble our determination to ensure we have a government that will guarantee the full implementation of the ILO Convention to end workplace sexual harassment and gender-based violence for good. Congress, please support. I second.
Thank you, Patrick. Call UCU.
President, Congress, Vicky Blake from UCU, speaking to the amendment that forms part of this composite. If I was subject to a non-disclosure agreement, it would mean this. It would mean I could not tell you about the most serious sexual harassment to which I've been subjected in the workplace. I might hesitate to tell a professional who could help. I would be unable to accurately explain disruption to my career path or to my studies. It would silence me. I am not subject to an NDA. I didn't get that far because their widespread use also contributes to and sustains the culture which did silence me for a long time. I feel nervous about even alluding to it here. There should not be one person in this room who is unaware that sexual harassment happens in workplaces everywhere, that widely respected people are capable of abuse, and bullying is no surprise to us. We are the reps and caseworkers. We know. Non-disclosure agreements silence victims and protect perpetrators of sexual harassment. They allow toxic workplace culture to go unchecked, and they are designed to prevent cases from reaching court. This means less case law, which might help further victims, and that the extent of harassment and abuse in the workplace goes severely underreported. We might discuss room for ethical confidentiality clauses in settlement agreements, where they would only be used in a clear and appropriate, principled way. We can protect individuals' rights to enter into confidentiality or to require that from their employer only if we are clear. It is only okay where individuals freely and willingly choose it, and here's the problem. How can an NDA be ethical if the alternative is the prospect of further abuse, harassment, the loss of your job, or even your career? This is corporate coercion and an abdication of responsibility to keep workers safe. The impact of such a stacked choice on victims of abuse cannot be underestimated. One of our members, Professor Anahid Kasabian, recently broke an NDA initiated by the University of Liverpool, which was supposed to bind her to silence over her case of bullying, which she describes as having forced her from her job while suffering from cancer and other health conditions. And her case exposes and gives voice to much which is hidden by NDAs. A BBC FOI request this year found that £87 million was spent by 96 universities in 2 years on 4,000 settlements, including a gagging clause, but we can't be more specific about what they're about, as the NDAs conveniently prevent employers from commenting. No circumstances should NDAs be used to gag staff experiencing workplace sexual misconduct, bullying or discrimination. Time's up abusers and time's up complicit silencers. Thank you for your support.
Thank you very much, Vicky. Call equity.
Maureen Beattie, Equity, speaking in support of Motion 38. President Congress, the ILO Convention has come at a very important moment in our collective efforts to end sexual harassment at work. For far too long in the entertainment industry, we tolerated bad behaviour and harassment as just a part of our business. The incredibly brave testimonies that followed in the wake of the Weinstein allegations gave us the opportunity to change this once and for all. It was our frankly amazing General Secretary, Christine Payne, who recognised and harnessed the power of these testimonies to begin the eradication of this kind of behaviour in the entertainment industry. As some of you will know, Christine missed Congress last year due to her own battle with ill health. But thanks once again to the magnificent staff of our NHS, she is back with us once more, all guns blazing, more formidable than ever. Through our subsequent Agenda for Change, our Safe Spaces campaign and our affirmation, which is read aloud at the start of each new project, we have been present in members' workplaces, in rehearsal rooms and theatres, on television and film sets, in nightclubs and circus tents, and on the streets, where the line between the performer and the character they're portraying can be especially blurred. We have been encouraging the victims of bullying and harassment and those who witness it to come forward and know that if they do, they will be believed and equity will be there to support them. We have seen a shift in perception among our members, in recognising bad behaviour and harassment for what it is, and in our resolve as an industry not to tolerate it. This year, we have an opportunity to push forward with achieving some of the legislative changes we so urgently need to protect and empower workers. Changes that were set out in Composite 5 that I was proud to move last year and which received unanimous support. Equity is very pleased to be part of the TUC's This Is Not Working campaign, which calls for a new legal duty on employers to proactively prevent harassment at work. For far too long, the burden of holding harassers and employers to account has rested with the individual. We hope that affiliates can mobilise further support around this important campaign, as well as engaging with the government's consultation. We must make sure that those who spoke out about the sexual abuse and harassment they experienced did not do so in vain, and that we seize this moment to further shift workplace culture. No one should be literally up for grabs. Please support the motion.
Thank you, Maureen. Call CWU.
President Congress Becca Houghton rising to support Composite 10 on behalf of the CWU. Sexual harassment in the workplace, something we know that takes place, something that we need to collectively stop. Caused by inequality, discrimination, and the perpetrator's lack of respect for those around them, let alone for themselves. The TUC's research on this is both shocking and crucial to highlighting the issue and helping us tackle it effectively. As their report, Still Just a Bit of Banter, says, sexual harassment is too often dismissed as a joke or even a compliment. But for victims, it is undermining, humiliating, and sometimes terrifying. It's outrageous that over half of the women in this country have been affected by unwanted sexual behaviours at work, and that 7 out of 10 of those in the LGBTI+ community suffer from sexual harassment. In France, 54% of black women aged between 18 and 44, 40% of homosexual and bisexual men have been subjected to degrading language and behaviour. Article 31, Fair and Just Working Conditions, point 1. Every worker has the right to work in conditions which respect his or her health, safety and dignity. Congress, this is a basic right for those within Europe under the Charter of Basic Human Rights. We need to advocate for this now more than ever. If we look at Lebanon, we see an average of 2 deaths of domestic workers per week. That's 104 working people a year, 10,400 working people in the 100 years of the ILO. It's alarming that 1 in 3 countries do not have laws against sexual harassment and violence in the workplace, leaving an estimated 235 million people unprotected. It is unacceptable. It is unforgivable. The CWU, along with other trade unions here and both here in the UK and around the world, fully support the groundbreaking convention from the ILO. Our job doesn't end there. We need to implement this convention. We need to force the responsibilities on our employers, on our government. It is time to eliminate sexual violence and harassment from workplaces, from homes of workers that we represent, and from our communities. Congress, please support.
Thank you very much, Rebecca. And I'm going to call the National Education Union.
Benda Prem Kumar, National Education Union, first-time delegate and speaker. President, Congress, we should celebrate the ILO's Convention on Sexual Harassment in the Workplace. It didn't emerge by chance, though. It took years of hard campaigning within the trade union movement, which came together with the voice of the women's movement and civil society. And it's a giant step, but unless the government ratifies the convention, none of the safeguards and protections against sexual harassment and violence in the workplace will apply to us or our members. If the government doesn't ratify, it won't have to review and improve its laws, and employers won't have to protect their workers in the way the convention requires. Whilst France and Canada are in a race with each other to be the first country to ratify this convention, we know this government will be in no hurry to do so. Therefore, it is up to us then to continue the fight and campaign to force this government to ratify it. The implementation of this convention can be truly transformative. Let me give you an example. Congress, imagine you are working with a highly accomplished, exemplary female colleague who takes immense pride in her work, but she has a secret that she's ashamed of. She's the victim of domestic violence. Her abusive partner decides not only to torment her at home, but follows her to work and extends his abuse to her workplace too. Under current laws, the employer has no responsibility towards your colleague. That may not surprise you. However, if we ratify the convention, it would be a different story. It would be the duty of the employer to take action to protect your colleague from the threat of domestic violence. The employer, for example, could provide time off for this colleague and implement other strategies to protect her, and her workplace can be the sanctuary that it should be. This convention offers other protections too, as speakers before me have alluded to. Congress, let's remind ourselves with real-life examples why these things are important. Remember the presidential candidate, Donald Trump, and he's bragging about being able to grab women by the pussy because he could get away with it? What was the justice for these women? Trump went on to win presidential elections. Remember Harvey Weinstein and his unusual interview techniques? Remember the floodgates that opened subsequently with the Me Too movement and the voices of women who had been silenced, sometimes for decades. Brothers and sisters, unfortunately, predators like this plague our workplaces too. There are far too many silence workers still who are too afraid to demand justice in our schools, hospitals, restaurants, call centres. We can make this convention a reality. Let's campaign to ratify it. Let's give power to the workers. Thank you.
Thank you, Venda, and all our speakers. I now move to the vote on Composite 10. All those in favour, please show. Thank you. Are there any against? Okay, that's carried unanimously. I now move to Composite 11, Mental Health and Wellbeing. General Council support the motion. It'll be moved by USDO, seconded by the PFA, and I intend to call the CWU, CSP and Equity, who are all covered in the composite, and then if time allows, PCS and Unison. So can I now ask USDO to move Composite 11 and the other speakers to be ready.
President, Congress, Paddy Lillis, USDO, moving the composite motion on mental health and wellbeing. Conference mental health is a trade union issue, and it is good to see such a broad range of unions involved in this motion today. From the supermarket to the postal sorting office, from the football pitch to the theatre, workers across the country are facing a mental health crisis. USDO, alongside many other unions, is campaigning to end that crisis. Trade unions are helping workers to speak out without fear of stigma or reprisal. And USDO organises workers in a number of low-paid sectors where jobs and the workers' contribution to society are frequently not taken seriously, where people assume they are just working for a bit of extra cash or as a stopgap on the way to something better. And sometimes, even in the trade union movement, we hear comments like, for that money, they might as well be stacking shelves in a supermarket. Congress, I understand that those comments are born out of a real frustrations about people being undervalued in their own jobs. But they are also based on a false perception about the nature of retail work. Colleagues, retail workers have a physically demanding, target-driven, people-focused jobs. Modern technology puts them under constant surveillance and the threat of performance management, and they have to deal with rude and abusive customers, not just now and again, but every single day. And colleagues, last year, on average, over 280 shop workers were assaulted every single day. Over 70% of female shop workers surveyed by USDA experience sexual harassment at work. And it's not only the incidence of abuse or harassment that cause stress, anxiety and depression. It's also the constant threat that the next attack is just around the corner. These factors of feeling undervalued, under pressure and under threat are creating a toxic work environment for millions of retail workers across the country. And when you add in the difficulties of balancing work with the current responsibilities, it gets even tougher. You have inadequate family-friendly rights, contracts that fail to guarantee enough hours from one week to the next, and poverty pay that's just not enough to feed family and pay the bills. USDO's Time for Better Pay campaign has shown that 2/3 of low-paid workers believe financial worries are impacting on their mental health. The way an employer operates and how they treat their staff has a direct impact on the mental health and well-being of their workforce. But the law is not on the side of workers. Employers don't need to make reasonable adjustments until after a worker has developed a disability. This is simply not acceptable. Where an employer's policy creates a real risk to mental health, whether it's understaffing, unreasonable targets, low pay, or short hours contracts, the employer should be under a legal duty to remove that risk before harm is caused, not after. And just as we protect physical health and safety with the requirements for personal protective equipment, we need to mirror this for mental health. When employers fail to make these reasonable adjustments, they need to feel the full weight of the law. Congress, trade unions need to highlight and campaign over mental health in the workplace. And for those reasons, USDO is promoting World Mental Health Day on the 10th of October. We want to see healthy workplaces and that means risks to workers' mental health being tackled. We would like to see the whole trade union movement back in World Mental Health Day as an opportunity to highlight the risks to mental health that workers face on a daily basis. Congress, on behalf of USDA, I move the composite. Thank you.
Thank you, Paddy. Call on the PFA.
President, Congress, Nick Cusack, Professional Footballers Association, seconding the composite. Becoming a professional footballer takes years of hard work and dedication. Players often begin this journey as young as 9 years of age, and by the time they sign their first professional contract at 17, most of their teammates are out of the game. In order to succeed, you need natural ability, discipline, and a ferocious determination to beat almost impossible odds. The players that make it into the professional ranks are the lucky ones, but that is just the start of their footballing journey. What happens during their career is far from easy, with highs and lows and a life that is often very detached from most people's experiences. The profession is fraught with uncertainty, and the constant pressure to perform and keep delivering is challenging and often very stressful. Congress, the stark reality is that the average length of a football career is only 8 years, and the day of reckoning when a footballer must find a normal job in the real world is always at the back of every player's mind. Indeed, this could come sooner than you think, as a bad tackle or loss of form could land you on the footballing scrap heap before you have reached your mid-20s. This is not lost on the PFA, and we have worked tremendously hard as a union to try and ease some of the difficulties inherent in our profession. This has taken the form of funding and support towards the training and education of players to meet the demands of life after football. We also provide considerable financial assistance to players who experience hardship post-football through our benevolent fund. These benefits have helped thousands of players over the years and have been critical in supporting them during the difficult transition to life away from the dressing room. However, that still leaves countless members requiring much greater help and assistance at what is for some a very traumatic time, and this can involve medical and clinical intervention. With this in mind, the PFA has put in place provision to tackle some of the difficult and intractable problems that our members face. We provide residential care and expert treatment for players experiencing difficulties with addiction, and have established a 24-hour helpline and a nationwide network of qualified counsellors to be on hand when players are finding it hard to cope. This has culminated in a big increase in our members coming forward to talk about their problems, and hopefully our initiatives will add impetus to other unions who I know do vital work in this area. Congress, a big shift has been necessary because in the past, mental health was overlooked within football, and often players were left to suffer in silence. My union has ensured that this is no longer the case, and is fully committed to doing everything possible to ensure that mental health is regarded as highly as physical health within our profession. Finally, with TUC support and sharing best practice with other unions, I hope that this movement can lead the way in this critical area, and as we have done throughout our proud history, provide our members with the best support and help when they need it most. Please support.
Thank you very much, Nick. CWU.
President Congress, Tony Cairns, Communication Workers Union, to support the composite, in particular to draw attention to paragraphs Roman numerals 4 and 5 on the issue of suicide. So the World Health Organization produced a report, I think it was last week, that said suicide is a global health issue. Over 800,000 people dying every year. Yet only 38 countries across the globe have a suicide prevention strategy. And with every death a tragedy, the World Health Organization says there is a dire need for prevention strategies to be incorporated into the national health and education strategies. And the story in the UK is that over 6,000 people take their lives each year. And of course, what we've seen through austerity, insecure work, a drop in living standards, and a rise in personal debt is we're creating the conditions that lead to depression and lead to despair. And the Office for National Statistics say that suicide is the leading cause of death in adults in this country below the age of 50. Last year, the mental health charity Mind did an extensive survey, over 44,000 people, and over 50% of those responding said that there were mental health problems associated with their current job. So what we know is that work-related issues lead to suicide. But, and this is the important issue, these cases remain invisible because work-related suicide in the UK is not recognised in legislation. In those countries where work-related suicides are recorded across the globe, United States, Australia, Japan, China and India, all show in recent years an extremely steep rise in the number of people taking their lives. And in France and Japan, not only are they recorded, but it is the employer's responsibility to tackle these issues. So the CW believes there is a clear link between work and mental health. And the key to reducing this is to get employers to help, to introduce measures that prevent, to not pressurise individuals, and to encourage health and support. And while we're there, we need to check our language. The phrases man up, the phrases get a grip, the phrases pull yourself together should have no part in dealing with these issues. So we need to campaign to change the law, and as part of that campaign, we need to carry out what we agreed at Motion 63 at last year's conference, which is a one-day conference to deal with this issue. But we need to change the law. That suicide and their attempts need to be investigated as work-related. But more importantly, that the burden of proof should rest with the employer to prove that they were not responsible. And coincidentally, today is World Suicide Prevention Day. And on that day, I think the TUC has an opportunity to say that we want to enshrine this in law so we end the scourge of work-related suicide. Thank you.
Thank you, Tony. I'll take CSP, then Equity, PCS and Unison, and then we'll be moving to the vote.
President, Congress, Rob Davis, Chartered Society of Physiotherapy, speaking in support of Motion 39. Right. As previously mentioned by the CWU, today is World Suicide Prevention Day. Last year, 6,507 people died in the UK as a result of suicide. And the latest statistics from the World Health Organization show that globally, one person dies as a result of suicide every 40 seconds. This means that by the time all speakers finish speaking on this motion, at least 25 individuals will have taken their own lives. In the TUC's Year of the Young Worker, it's also important to highlight that suicide is the second leading cause of death amongst 15 to 29-year-olds after road traffic collisions. Another alarming statistic is that for each person who dies by suicide, a further 25 make a suicide attempt. But conference, suicides are not inevitable, they're preventable. 1 in 4 people will experience some kind of mental health problem in the course of a year, and 1 in 6 report a common mental health problem, such as anxiety or depression, in any given week. Yet mental health remains the poor relation in the NHS. Despite recent Prime Ministerial promises and a legal requirement for parity of esteem between physical and mental health, lengthy waiting times for psychological therapy are common, and many people receive care miles from home and family because of services are not available locally. You may have seen or heard about Jeremy Hunt's tweet about how he hoped mental health services received a share of the cash injection promised by the Chancellor. But perhaps he's forgotten about the damaging real terms cuts to mental health funding that he oversaw while he was in office. The ONS has reported the risk of suicide in female healthcare workers is 24% higher than the national average. And additionally, research carried out by the Association of Ambulance Chief Executives found that the risk of suicide amongst male paramedics was 75% higher than the average population. As someone with a brother-in-law who is a paramedic and under the age of 30, that terrifies me. Congress, the current situation is not sustainable. It's no exaggeration to say we are facing a mental health crisis, not only in the NHS, but in social care. Therefore, we support this motion and call on the government to address the funding crisis in mental health services, to have real parity of esteem between mental and physical health, and for there to be a legal duty on employers to measure the impacts of the workplace on their staff's mental health and act upon the findings. And finally, Congress, just remember, it's okay not to be okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Robert. Equity?
Sam Swan, Equity, long-time fan, first-time delegate and speaker. President, Congress, the conditions that come with working in the entertainment industry present real challenges to mental well-being. The financial insecurity and precariousness of our working lives can take their toll, with work in the sector characterized by insecure and short-term contracts as well as low pay, with 67% of Equity members earning less than £10,000 a year from their work in the industry. It can be incredibly difficult to navigate frequent rejection and periods of unemployment and uncertainty about where the next job will come, or if it will come at all. As Tony Cairns and Robert Davies already pointed out, it's World Suicide Prevention Day today. I think it's really important to highlight the fact that suicide is elevated in our profession. It's 69% higher for women than the female average and 20% higher for men. And after a clutch of suicides in our industry, an extensive survey conducted by Equity to understand the scale of mental health issues found that the two most common factors contributing to poor mental health were, surprise, surprise, financial issues and lack of work. One respondent told us, "I was out of pocket and my employer was late in paying me, which was the last straw. I didn't know if they would, and with the financial pressure I was under, I had a breakdown." From the survey, our union co-created artsminds.co.uk to support those in the industry dealing with emotional stress and the relentless stress from debt and financial worries. One comment that has stuck with me is from an actor, Danny Colligan, who said that outside of doing a show, you have a constant feeling that you're failing. And this reminded me of an article called Good for Nothing by the late great working class writer and cultural theorist Mark Fisher, who said that one of the most successful tactics of the ruling class has been responsibilization. Each individual member of the subordinate class is encouraged into feeling that our poverty, our lack of opportunities, our unemployment is our fault and our fault alone. For too long, workplaces and working conditions have been causing mental health problems, but then pushing the problem back onto the worker to solve, as if the whole problem was solely a lack of individual resilience. But a mindfulness class, a bit of meditation, or downloading some app is not going to solve this collective mental health crisis. We need collective action. As well as ensuring that all workers suffering with mental health issues receive the expert support they need, we need employers to recognise and act on their responsibilities for safeguarding mental health and well-being, to tackle this issue collectively rather than individually, as a health and safety problem, by assessing risks that are likely to cause harm and to take action to control that risk. Congress, please support this motion. Thank you.
Thank you, Sam. PCS and then Unison.
Congress, Steve Swainson, PCS, speaking in support of Composite Motion 11. Congress, mental health issues are a growing concern nationally, and it's clear that they're far more prevalent in low-paid work. Over 10 years of pay erosion and years of cutbacks in the civil service has affected the working conditions of our members, and as a result, stress and mental health issues in the workplace are on the increase. Being a civil servant nowadays means low pay, unmanageable workloads, job insecurity, and a lack of career prospects. Steps taken by the civil service to raise awareness of mental health issues are welcome, but they don't address the underlying issues of why there's a problem in the first place. 27% of civil servants' absences are related to mental health illnesses, and 45% are currently or have recently suffered from stress. 11% of civil servants experience bullying and harassment at work, and this is a statistic that has not changed since 2009. The cost of living pressures outside of work are further compounded by low pay, reducing workers' ability to live a healthy lifestyle, worry and debt-free, and many of our members are actually claiming universal credit in order to be able to afford to support their families. Growing numbers are in receipt of the minimum wage in my department, the Department for Work and Pensions, and pressure on staff to perform are manifested in discriminatory performance management systems and targets, with draconian sickness absence policies, which mean that staff come back to work ill, worrying about work, deadlines, sick warnings, or even dismissals. All of these are exacerbated by years of peer restraint and attack on terms and conditions, on pensions, and on retirement age. PCS have been developing and rolling out mental health awareness training for our reps, and our reps are inundated with personal cases related to mental ill health of our members. We agree in PCS that the need to campaign for employers to be under a legal duty to assess the impacts of their policies, practices and procedures, including pay and conditions, and the effect that they have on mental health of our workers. We believe that this needs cross-union campaigning that challenges modern-day working conditions and supports reps and members to challenge employers when they're failing. We need to reverse the cuts in health and safety executive and to reverse the cuts in mental health support services, which are undermining the safeguarding of workers. Ultimately, the best way to challenge low pay, bad working conditions, and to tackle mental health problems is to build a strong, visible, serious union workforce that campaigns effectively to end low pay and to challenge the toxic cultures in the workplace, and that brings all of our members together in an alliance that fosters dignity, respect, and equality for all. Please support.
Thank you, Steve. And Unison.
President Congress, Sian Stockham speaking for Unison in support of Composite 11. Congress, work-related stress now accounts for more than 50 million working days being lost each year, more than half of all days lost. Nearly 600,000 people report suffering from work-related stress, depression and anxiety. Since the advent of Tory austerity in 2010, we have seen cases of stress, depression and anxiety steadily increasing. Overwork, bullying, job insecurity, these are the messages we hear from our members. Many of the public services that this country cherishes most, from hospitals to schools, social care and policing services, are provided by these very workers, whose pay and terms of condition are amongst the worst in the country. Low pay, long hours, 0-hour contracts, job insecurity, these are all too often a day-to-day part of life of public service workers. In addition, some workers, such as home care workers, are often isolated and alone. And were it not for the efforts of their union, they would have little knowledge of what limited rights they have. Congress, the relationship between poverty and mental health may be complex, but the truth is the poorer you are, the more likely your mental health will also be poor. Unison has been at the forefront of the fight against this government's rush to turn Britain into a low-wage economy, to slash workers' rights and to cut public services. And Congress, this race to the bottom is the reason Boris Johnson is so keen for Britain to leave the EU without a deal. The fight against low pay is part of the fight for better mental health. That is why Unison launched initiatives such as the Ethical Care Charter in home care. Nearly 50 employers have now signed to it. Unison is also involved in initiatives to protect apprentices through local apprenticeship agreements and the safety of workers through the End Violence at Work Charter. Congress, stress-related ill health should be treated like any other workplace hazard. Yet despite employers being legally obliged to protect health and safety workers, all too often the mental health of workers is ignored. That is why Unison is committed to campaigning to get the government to treat stress like any other hazard and to make illness resulting from work-related stress reportable as an industrial injury. Congress, it's time we redoubled our efforts to fight for better mental health, but we can't do that without also fighting against low pay. Thank you, Congress. Please support.
Thank you, Sian, and for all those excellent contributions in that debate. I move to the vote on Composite Motion 11. All those in favour? Thank you. All those against? Thank you. Congress, just a quick update. There's 4 motions left. They're all in the equality section, and I've indicated that I'm minded to bring everyone in who's asked to speak because I don't want to turn anybody down. But that will mean we're not going to get all of these 4 in before the close of business. So we're either going to take all the speakers, in which case anything we don't take this afternoon will be picked up tomorrow. So if you're on the list and your union decides it wants to withdraw, let us know. Otherwise, I'll tend to take everybody. So in that spirit, I'm now moving to motion 41, tackling racist ideologies. It's to be moved by the EIS, seconded by RMT. And then I'm going to call Unite, FBU, and NAS UWT. So can you all be ready? And please stick to time because we want to get through as much as we can. So can I have EIS to move motion 41? Okay.
Bill Ramsey, Educational Institute of Scotland, moving amended motion 41. President, sisters and brothers, anyone employed as a teacher in the public sector in Scotland, and from next year, the private sector too, have to be registered with the General Teaching Council of Scotland, the GTCS. Consequently, there is a requirement to abide by a set of professional standards, including values and professional commitment. So there is a duty, I repeat, a duty, to teach social justice in Scottish schools, which means that to do anything other than support this motion would be to reject the standards we Scottish teachers are obliged to uphold. The following is a direct quote from the GTCS website. GTCS maintains a set of professional standards which are underpinned by the themes of values, sustainability and leadership, professional values that are at the core of the standards, end quote. This means that in Scotland, if you are teaching young people, teaching how to tackle racist ideologies is part of the job. This means that tackling racist ideologies sits alongside, not below, teaching how to read, teaching how to write, and teaching how to count. Sisters and brothers, right-wing populism and corrosive iterations of nationalism are on the rise. On the rise here, on the rise in Europe, and as graphically illustrated in the front page of the Searchlight magazine that was in our conference packs, which is a really good illustration, as I say, in Europe. And as I learned a few weeks ago at the Educational International Congress, it's across the globe as well. As our ideological battle with the racists develop, so too should our resources and our collective response. As the late Max Levitas, remembered in our obituary session on Sunday, would tell us, the essentials have not changed one whit. However, brothers and sisters, due to the advent of social media, those established economic drivers are being weaponized in ways which the baseball bats and more that Francis referred to yesterday are being used and deployed. This means that the terrain of this battle of ideas has been transformed. That's why we need the extra resources that this motion calls for. More than that, the Scottish National Party government in Scotland, and more than that, the Labour administration in Wales, we need resources from them, and we need them now. We, of course, need resources from the UK government, but the current iteration, I would hold my breath, whose last 4 iterations have got worse and worse and worse again, regressing into what, rather than who, occupies the basement in number 10 today. Like in the climate change emergency, this racist emergency has no safe havens. The racist ideological upsurge has the potential to impact everywhere. In classrooms, in workplaces, in communities, and in every institutional construct you care to think of. The racist challenge is not over the horizon, Congress. The racist challenge is on the march. It's in the forward slopes of the public discourse. Brothers and sisters, it's now at the point-blank range, and we need them ammunition, so please support the motion.
Thank you, Bill. RMT to second.
Greetings, Congress. Glenn Hart, RMT, rising to second the motion 41 and first time Speaker at Congress. Congress, as many of you will know, last year RMT activists and officials were attacked by fascists and far right. Our Senior Assistant General Secretary, Steve Headley, myself and other activists and supporters were attacked after a counter demo against Tommy Robinson. RMT members and supporters were injured and forced to defend themselves and defend other vulnerable anti-fascist protesters. Congress, we were grateful for the widespread message of solidarity at the time, including from Labour leader Jeremy Corbyn. But as we know, the threat of the far right is escalating. In January of this year, far-right protesters abused RMT picket lines in Manchester, including using far racist abuse. Congress, the response from the trade union and anti-fascist movement was magnificent, with solidarity protests the following weekends in defence of RMT pickets. Congress, we know that individual unions will be doing what they can do to beat the far right. But we as a collective movement must be doing far more to combat the threat of the far right, and that is what this motion and amendment is calling for. And as Congress, as a reminder, last year our proposal for the TUC was to call a special conference to plan a trade union response to the far right, and that was passed unanimously. That has not happened yet, and we would urge the General Council to make sure it does happen. Because fighting racism is, of course, in our DNA. We know hundreds, if thousands, of trade unionists died resisting Nazis in Germany and across occupied Europe, and thousands more joined the International Brigade to fight Franco's armies in Spain. We fought them then, and we fight them now because the fascists are the opposite of everything we stand for. For equality and justice for all, regardless of race, gender, faith or sexuality, please support the motion.
Thank you, Glenn. Collier Knight.
Congress President Susan Matthews, speaking on behalf of Unite in support of Motion 41. Congress, racism is an ideology and it's a common thread within all forms of discrimination. We are witnessing politicians saying as they please, have their ideology on race. It's common across Europe and it's growing across globally. I would describe this as an important shift with the agenda to promote discrimination and racism. We have all seen with horror the growth of the far right in this country. We now have a prime minister who comes to office wearing a double masquerade mask, who is promoting casual racism, as well as keeping the racism policies of previous government. With the increase in racism, we are seeing more insult, negative and stereotype based on prejudice and racism being used, including by our own Prime Minister. And he's determined to go along with the US President, who has an agenda of promoting the far right around the world. We know there has been an increase in hate crime, and our Black and Asian and ethnic minority trade union members are having to deal with more racism in the workplace than ever before. Racism has an impact. It marginalizes individuals Let us build courage and stop the flood of fear from these politicians. In Unite, we have been doing our unity over division work, expanding our education work, and talking to rep and members about how racism has no place in our movement or in our workplace or community, and how the far right have no answers for working class people. We support the work of Show Racism the Red Card, using the football as a way to speak into our children about how to end racism and celebrate our diversity. We call on all to take action and stand up against racism by affiliate to Show Racism the red card. And basically, Friday, the 18th of October 2019, to encourage all unions to participate and the community to participate by wearing a red for the day and also affiliate to Show Racism red card. We will not let racism divide us or erase our proud history of Black and Asian trade unionists and socialists in this country. Before I finish, I put my twist to this. I give you a message from Martin Luther King, and this is for the government, and this is a pre-warning. A riot is a language of the unheard. So basically what we're saying, if this government unheard and not listening to what the working class people are saying, then that means we have a trouble ahead of us. And this is a message far and wide. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Susan. FPU.
President Congress, Cameron Matthews from the Fire Brigades Union, speaking in support of Motion 41. 24 hours a day and 365 days a year, our members are out there risking their lives to save the lives of others. And they save lives regardless of race, regardless of religion, regardless of gender or sexual orientation, regardless of any protected characteristic. We protect those in our communities. Why do we do this? Because the Fire and Rescue Service is a humanitarian service, a service that helps people in our communities when they're at their most vulnerable. And the Fire Brigades Union is an extension of those principles. And that's why we oppose anyone who attempts to divide our communities. We oppose anyone who spreads hate and fear. Comrades, we face a real and present danger represented by the shadow and menace of the nationalist far right. We see outcomes in mass murder after mass murder of innocent people from minority communities. Murdered at the hands of far-right terrorists radicalised by hate speech spewed in media, online and in platforms around the world. There is a very real rise in populism across the globe, threatening our safety. And that's why we must pose a very real response. Trump, Johnson, Farage, Yaxley Lennon, and many other anti-union, anti-worker, far-right elitists disgracefully use racism, dog-whistle politics, racist tropes, and scapegoating to other minority communities. So we, the trade union movement, must be the voice and body of opposition to them in very tangible terms and not just words. Now, I know what you're all thinking, Congress. Can a fire engine pump 1,800 litres of strawberry milkshake at 7 bar pressure? I don't know the answer to that, but maybe it's time that we found out. We must tackle this hatred every single day. We must tackle it on our streets, in our workplaces, in Parliament, and if it does arise with some rotten little apples in our trade unions, then we need to tackle them as well. Anywhere the nationalist far right attempts to raise its ugly head, it will be met by principled trade unionists. The working class trade union movement must be the united front and force for good to fight this hate-filled ideology. Together, we can be the frontline response. Together, we can safeguard all the people in our communities from this dangerous and sinister threat of far-right nationalism. Support your comrades, support your communities, and support this motion. Thank you.
Fantastic. Thank you, Cameron. And finally, NASUWT.
President, Congress, Andrea Welter, NASUWT, the Teachers Union, and I'm a first-time speaker. I'm speaking in support of Motion 41 on tackling racist ideologies. The NASUWT welcomes and fully supports this motion. As our research has shown, racism and racist ideologies are rife and continue to blight the lives of many in our workplaces and in society in general. Tackling racism is therefore fundamental to the NASUWT campaigning, bargaining and organising agenda. The NASUWT has long been concerned by the persistent nature of racial injustice and discrimination and has worked tirelessly over many years on strategies for eliminating racial discrimination and advancing racial equality. We continue to challenge situations where BME teachers face prejudice, marginalisation, hatred and abuse because of their ethnicity, nationality or religious belief through casework, policies as well as campaigning and bargaining. NASUWT research has shown that experiencing racism at work is part of everyday life for many BME teachers and that this racism takes many forms. Often it is hidden, but it is abundantly clear in the disproportionate numbers of BME teachers who fail to obtain leadership positions and the fact that BME teachers are nearly twice as likely as their counterparts to have been threatened with capability procedures or have been put on a support plan. This lack of support is forcing BME teachers to question their future in a profession that is failing to support them and needs them. It is for this reason that the NASUWT has actively strengthened its Act for Racial Justice campaign, a campaign built on the foundations of workplace and community organising. Congress, we know what happens in society is also played out in schools and other educational establishments. We must continue to challenge the rise in right-wing populism and anti-immigrant rhetoric that is evident throughout the UK, wider Europe and beyond. No one is born racist or with racist ideologies, so where do they come from? One would assume that this issue would not affect primary school children, but it does, as what they see or hear they repeat and act out. Currently, there are children who think it is acceptable to tell children, who I may add they are friends with, to go back home, call them names, or disrespect their identity, culture, or religion. Congress, we cannot allow the current political instability to overshadow this much-needed action against racist ideology. Anti-racism work must remain a priority for the TUC and all its affiliates. As Ruby Bridges highlighted, racism is a grown-up disease and we must stop using our children to spread it. Congress, please support this motion.
Thank you, Andrea, and to all those fantastic contributions. A move to the vote on motion 41. All those in favour, please show. All those against? That's carried unanimously. Now move to motion 42 on period poverty. This is going to be moved by Tracy Fussy on behalf of the TUC Women's Conference, seconded by ASLEF. Then can PCS, COP, Unite, NEU and RMT be ready? Because we want to try and get through as much as we can. So if all those speakers can be ready, can I ask Tracy to move motion 42?
President Congress, Tracy Fussy, CW, moving motion 42. In Congress, women in the UK throughout their lifetime spend an average of £18,450 on their periods. That's more than a year's salary for someone on the national minimum wage. And over the course of a single year, the cost is nearly £500, simply not affordable for most people on low income. 10 years ago, the union movement was campaigning to support organisations that help to provide sanitary products in the developing world. But now in 2019, thanks to 9 years of Tory austerity and the explosion of low-paid and insecure work, period poverty is on the rise here in the UK. In one of the wealthiest nations in the world and the 5th largest economy, it is deeply shameful that over 137,000 girls have missed school because of period poverty, taking time off simply to avoid embarrassment and indignity. And it's a disgrace that unsuitable, non-sanitary materials are being used simply to enable people to be able to get on with their lives. And it's a shocking fact that many have to choose between food or sanitary wear. And it is a complete tragedy that families, many of them working all hours to make ends meet, are forced to turn to food banks for sanitary products. The rollout of universal credit has made things even more difficult for those struggling on a tight budget. something that will never be fixed under a Boris Johnson government. No one should face a period without the products they need, and no one should suffer any financial detriment because of this natural biological function. And this is not just an issue of income inequality, it's also a human rights issue. And that's why access to sanitary products should be universally free and VAT abolished for all sanitary provisions. And it's surely not right that tampons and sanitary towels continue to be taxed as luxury, non-essential items in the UK. These are not luxury items, they are a necessity. In our national campaign, the CWU has been working with the Red Box Project and parliamentarians, forcing the government to go further with its pledge to provide sanitary products in schools and colleges. And we've also sent a joint letter signed by over 70 MPs to the Chancellor, demanding that access to sanitary products are universal and free, and we continue to support Monica Lennon MSP's bill in Scotland and the expansion of this initiative into Wales. Supporters of our campaign, including Jeremy Corbyn, who wore our Make Period Products Free campaign sticker during Prime Minister's questions, have helped raise awareness about the lack of progress on this issue in England. But more needs to be done politically and industrially to make sure that period poverty is eradicated throughout the whole of the UK. In Congress, the debate about sanitary products is moving forward, and it's absolutely right that everyone has access to the essentials of life. Setting benchmarks, the CWU, as an employer, has started providing free sanitary products in the toilets of our buildings, and we have begun discussions with major employers that we have relationships with and recognition, encouraging them to do the same. Congress, support the motion. Go back to your workplaces, engage with your employers, lobby your MPs. Let's all get behind the campaign. Let's make sanitary products universally free and tax-free for all. I move.
Thank you, Tracy. I call the NEU to second.
President, Congress, Heather Mackenzie, NEU, TUC Women's Committee. Proud to second motion 42, seeing period poverty go to period dignity, hopefully at this conference. And proud to say that I've always been seen the trade union movement and our brothers supporting us all through our lives with this issue. For me personally, it was my dad, a shop steward and an engineer in the 1960s and 1970s, who was the person who took me for my first bra and bought me my first Dr. White's and sanitary belt, as it was called then. He did this while regaling the assistant with much embarrassment on her behalf of his shame, of his mother's shame, as a single parent in Glasgow in the 1930s, trying to provide similar for herself and her sister without the means or a welfare system to support her. For many, sadly, this has not changed. It is now all our legacy and our responsibility to challenge this debilitating, isolated and shaming situation, to make period products, towels, tampons, moon cups and the like, free for everyone at the point of need. We must prioritise this campaign and continue with our sister campaigning, including maternity and menopause as a workplace issue, through the Women's Committee, the Council of the Isles and here today. Once and for all, to banish our monthly friend and embrace our normal bodily functions, to be liberated so that our mental, emotional, physical and social well-being are part of conversations and policies in our workplaces and our lives. Menstruation, maternity and menopause, as worked before, are political issues for every woman in this room and in our movement, and we must remain central to coordinating this within our Labour movement if we are to achieve the success of our Scottish sisters and brothers and as outlined in the objectives of this motion. We welcome free products and we welcome the 10 million pledge from Labour too, but we must continue to campaign for policy to change this and to quash once and for all this hidden inequality. We need to educate and agitate and organise, as we do on everything. The time is now for schoolgirls, for the growing number of homeless women, for asylum seekers, for refugees to smash this financial poverty trap. Let's make sure that the Kerrys of this world, who gave up the chance to use their own sanitary products because she had to pay electricity bill and she had to feed her children, and she remembered being at school 30 years earlier and missing school because she was too frightened to go to school. That's happening in our society today, and it should not be happening. As mentioned, period products are not discretionary luxury items. They are our human right for 50% of the workforce of the world, and we have to make sure that goes through. Make sure, everybody today, that it's our duty to ensure that free products are available for all. Thank you.
Thank you, Heather. Call Asleth.
Simon Weller, Asleth, speaking in support of this motion. Now, for those who don't know, Asleth is the Union for Train Drivers, and it is a particularly male-dominated industry with only 5% of train drivers being women. And in 2017, an international report found that 1 in 10 girls and women in the UK said they'd been unable to afford sanitary protection, while 1 in 7 said they had struggled to afford it at all. And union reps are seeing firsthand the impact period poverty has. Being unable to afford menstruation protection means girls may miss out on their school, women may not be able to attend shifts, and it can impact mental health, confidence, and limit their ability to take part in day-to-day activities. So as trade unionists, what can we do? Well, we need to educate and organise. We need to organise in our workplaces, in our schools, in our hospitals, and in our communities, so that everyone has period dignity, able to access menstruation products freely available to all at the point of need, wherever they are. Then we need to educate where menstruation equality is more than an issue of access. We need to remove the stigmatisation of periods. We need to inform and empower. And as trade unionists, we are perfectly positioned to do this. It's kind of our bread and butter work. But importantly, it must also be the male reps that will be highlighting these issues and delivering the change that we need. The TUC's Women's Committee and our Young Workers Committee have had an ambitious programme of work to start doing this. And we need to tackle the root cause of why some women and girls are unable to afford these products. We need to organise against poverty and the gendered nature of poverty. Women are disproportionately more likely to experience poverty because of entrenched and endemic structural inequality. More than 1/5 of women, 22%, have a persistent low income, compared to approximately 14% of men. Living in persistent poverty denies women the opportunity to build up savings and assets to fall back in times of hardship. After a decade of austerity, women and those with disabilities and BME communities have been hit hardest by the changes to our tax and benefit systems and public services, leaving the poorest families amongst having lost the most. That's why the trade union movement is pushing back against the disastrous universal credit system. We are organising for a true living wage, one that women and their families can live on. We are campaigning for a day one right to flexible work, not just a right to request. And we will continue to put gender equality and women's reproductive health, menstruation, maternity and menopause at the top of the collective bargaining agenda. Please support.
Thank you, Simon. I call PCS, then COP.
President, Congress, Louise Kowalska, PCS, supporting motion 42. The communists are in the House. The English have landed, and I am with Andrew, who visits every month. These are not my predictions for Sunday's newspaper headlines, but alleged euphemisms for a person experiencing menstruation. Amusing they may be, but language transformation is necessary in reducing the current stigma and negative culture surrounding menstruation in the workplace and society. Such language disempowers women, and this taboo needs to be confined to the history books. There exists excellent campaigns to effect change and alleviate period poverty, including Bloody Good Period and On the Ball, a superb example of 3 exceptional young women lobbying Celtic Football Club to provide free period products to fans. The initiative, now spread to over 100 other football clubs, is inspirational and in the true tradition of Mary Barber, the Glasgow Girls, and the Glasgow Equal Pay campaigners. Whilst not in the motion, I do have to ask Congress itself, requesting if it would consider taking the lead and providing free period products for the use of delegates, exhibitors, and workers at Congress from 2020. I estimate that the cost would be the same as providing caterers for a fringe event. Together with sister unions, PCS is campaigning in workplaces, negotiating with the Cabinet Office with a view to supply free products in reserved government departments. The motion outlines the initiatives that the Scottish and Welsh governments have made. PCS that believes that governments, as employers, should be exemplars. The Westminster government has fallen short on this issue. PCS always campaigns in schools under the Period Dignity banner. We have period warriors, leaving period products in toilets and organising Wear Red Days. Negotiations are currently underway with the Scottish Government to provide eco-friendly and reusable products. It is estimated that a woman will dispose of 11,400 tampons in their lifetime, an ecological disaster. My own branch in Edinburgh took direct action, creating a donation point for products for all staff to use, with excess donations passed to a local women's refuge. Further, I proposed a motion for pre-provision for the Scottish Government employees at our group conference. Serendipity it may have been, but the very next day, Permanent Secretary announced that the Scottish Government were to go ahead. I expect great things for tomorrow. This is an uncontested issue. We all support period poverty. I urge you to support the motion. Thank you.
Thank you, Louise. COP.
President Congress Katie Collins College of Podiatry, proud to be supporting motion 42. With 76% of our membership being female, the College of Podiatry has been doing a lot of work utilising the TUC's resources on menopause and period policies, with them fully adopted by our organisation and being actively rolled out to our members, encouraging them to have these policies in their practices. When this motion came through the Women's TUC, we were shocked and saddened to hear how there was so much inaccessibility to sanitary items to women and girls in this country still today. With delegate after delegate getting up explaining how children in their schools were having to be provided with these products because it was either a choice between these or food. This is a terrible consequence of this government's austerity regime. But it is also a condemnation of society in general, where women's health is still not being taken seriously. I was born with a deformed heart and have been in and out of hospital all of my life with multiple heart surgeries. But not once have I ever been offered sanitary products or seen anyone else being offered sanitary products. Yet men are routinely offered shaving kits. Whilst of course it helps male patients to feel fresh and clean to have a shave, it is not a health risk to have 5 o'clock shadow. Whereas if a woman does not change her sanitary products on a regular basis, it can put her at risk of serious health conditions and in the most serious cases even death. This is why the college are educating our members about period poverty and are actively encouraging our members to provide access to free sanitary products in their practices so we can do our bit to help tackle this appalling situation. And the college has free products for all our staff as well in the college offices. So we wholeheartedly support this motion and we ask you to do this too.
Thank you, Katie. I'm going to take Unite in the RMT, and if we're fairly swift here, we'll get another motion in. So, Unite.
President, Conference. Right. I work for Newry Morn and Down District Council, okay? And I bullied and harassed them to bring in the period dignity for young girls in my council. Now, after months and months of fighting the bed out with them, they gradually said, right, okay, then we can see, well, we'll do it. So it was for the period dignity. So let me tell you now just what my council classes as period dignity. First, they've asked all of the staff to donate sanitary products to this pink bin in the council's offices so that it can be for the young girls. Not a problem. Then what they've decided to do is, on the back of the toilet doors, now they're only doing this in the leisure centre at the minute, one place, okay? So then we went down to take a look at what they were doing. So you imagine a young girl, maybe 12, 13, in the changing room of the leisure centre, takes her period suddenly. So what does she have to do? Well, my council, Newry Morn and Down District Council, have decided that they have to get dressed, they have to go to the back of the door, pick a little black dot sticker off the door and do the walk of shame up a long corridor to go to reception in order to hand this sticker over, only for somebody to hand them a sanitary product. Now seriously, is that anywhere dignity in this day and age? No, it's not. So I had a go at them, okay? And I said, the sanitary products should be in the changing rooms. They should be in the toilets, free of charge for the kids. I was told, well, they might steal them. Yeah? So I said, well, tell me something. Do you steal the toilet roll when you come out of the male toilets? Right? So, seriously. So then he tried to turn around and say to me then that, oh, maybe we'll go against the contract that we have with Canon Hygiene. Bullshit. Right? Bullshit. I swear to God, I've never in my life seen anything like it. Right? So I said, look, these kids are coming to the leisure centre. So what I was told was, well, if they can come to the leisure centre and they can afford to go for a swim, they can afford to buy sanitary products. Right? Now this is a man with kids of his own, okay? So I actually told him then, well, do you know what? These kids come from a swimming group from the schools. They get free swimming lessons at schools. So no, they don't pay to go into the leisure centre because they can't afford to. So I have to get this bit right, okay? Glass is wrong because I can't see anything, okay? So, I'm just going to say, right, this is what I need to say, right? Now, I'm asking Congress to please let every ignorant, backward, Stone Age employer be put on notice here and now that we will name and shame each and every one of them. So Congress, can you please support women's dignity, support young girls' dignity, and support this motion? Thank you.
Thank you, Brady. That's fantastic. And finally, the RMT.
President, Congress. Jeanette Hosseini, RMT, first time delegate and first time speaker. Congress, the title of the motion is period poverty, but the issue is not only affordability but accessibility. Back in December 2017, there was some sort of press coverage over the fact that at Glasgow Central Station, my own place of work, there was no access to any sanitary products at all in the station toilets. In Edinburgh Waverley Station, the cost of a pack of 4 sanitary towels was as much as £3 in the toilets. Both of these stations are run by Network Rail. As said before, Monica Lennon, a member of Scottish Parliament, wrote to the Managing Director of ScotRail Alliance, an alliance which includes Network Rail. She urged them to take action to provide free products in these stations. Network Rail responded by saying it would be delighted in supporting her requests. Congress, despite this encouraging words, no such support has ever taken place. Simple access has been an ongoing issue, an issue that was raised by the RMT with CalMac ferries, highlighting that for both the travelling public and the staff working there was no access to any products at all on any of the ferries. An issue I'm pleased to say that CalMac has resolved by providing free sanitary products to all on all of its services. This goes to show you what can happen when people work together. Congress, the RMT has written to all train operating companies, Network Rail and the Transport for London, urging them to provide free sanitary products to all, not only at stations, but also on onboard services travelling up and down the country. Congress, please support this motion. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Jeanette, and for all those fantastic contributions in that debate. I'm going to move now to motion 42 to the vote. All those in favour? Thank you very much. All those against? That's agreed unanimously. Now going to take motion 43. Call on Gloria Mills on behalf of the TUC Black Workers Conference, seconded by the NASUWT. This is End Discrimination in State Reciprocal Pension Arrangements. Gloria.
Okay, good afternoon, Conference. Gloria Mills, Unison, Chair of the TUC Race Relations Committee. Moving motion 43 on behalf of the TUC Black Workers Conference. Congress, President Congress, I'm pleased to be moving this motion to end the discrimination in the state reciprocal pension arrangements. For years, people worked knowing that at the end of their working life, their state pension was guaranteed, but not anymore. Politicians in the government have taken it upon themselves to change our pensions whenever they make a mess of the economy or they make a mess of the country. They impose austerity measures and they increase the state pension retirement age. But not only that, they target the poorest in our country and the poorest in our communities. And Congress, when it comes to the state pension, women and black people are hit the hardest. Congress, this is a class issue. It is penalizing poor working class people who are dependent on their state pension. After 3.8 million women born in the 1950s who have been denied their state pension at the age of 60 without notice until it was too late, and a chancellor who said it was the easiest £5 billion a year that he saved from denying women their state pension. Women born in the 1950s not only do not have a state pension, one of the meagerest state pension in the developed world, and yet they're now reliant on food banks, zero-hour contracts, and are being sanctioned by the Department for Work and Pensions for not being able to continue working at age 67 or 68. And now the Tories are planning to raise the state pension age to 75. And the so-called Centre for Social Justice, you can't make it up, the same cabal of people who came up with universal credit are now talking about increasing the state pension age to 75. But they are not looking at taxing their friends, their rich friends, who are not paying their fair share of tax and who are involved in some of the most appalling tax dodging schemes we have in this country. So they know nothing about social justice. But if you're a British national and you dream of retiring abroad, you will soon discover the horror of having your state pension frozen at the date you retire. And not only that, the government will veto which country you decide to live in terms of whether or not you get your pension increased and uprated every year. This is absolutely disgraceful. So you can't decide to retire to a country anywhere in the world and have your state pension paid at the same rate as if you lived in the UK, because the government vetoes and stops your state pension being increased. And I tell you, if we do leave this European Union with a no-deal Brexit, this would happen to British people living in EU countries. They will have their state pension frozen, and it will not be uprated in line with inflation. It's really an appalling state where we have a government deciding to pay people and uprate their pensions based on where they choose to live. It has nothing to do with the state. The role of the state is to pay your full state pension wherever you choose to live. Whether you choose to live in the UK or you choose to live in Timbuktu, you should have your state pension paid. It's blatant discrimination. It's treating British people less equal than others, and we should stop it. And finally, conference, I also want to say that, we must support the women born in the 1950s who are campaigning for full restitution of their state pension to be paid at the age of 60. And we must use the temporary special measure, which is in CEDAW. We used it to have all women shortlist, and we should use it to pay full restitution to the women born in the 1950s. And conference, I ask you, fight for justice and pension justice for women and black workers now, but also we should stop the government from breaching their promise to pay our state pension wherever we choose to live. Congress, I move. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that, Gloria, and call on the NASUWT to second.
Andrea Welter, NASUWT, the Teachers' Union, seconding motion 43, End Discrimination in State Reciprocal Pension Arrangements. The NASUWT strongly supports and welcomes this motion from the TUC Black Workers Conference. The motion states the key issue succinctly and clearly, that working people who have paid national insurance and taxes for their working lives to the UK government, but who wish to retire abroad, may not receive the same state pension as other working people who have paid national insurance and taxes for their working lives, but who retire in Britain, the European Economic Area, or countries with a reciprocal agreement with the UK government to uprate pensions, the largest of which is the United States. Working people who decide to retire abroad are subject to a lottery as to whether their state pension will be uprated every year to keep its value, or whether it will be frozen at the level at which they first took it. The NASUWT understands the circumstances which have led to this historical anomaly, but this does not make the anomaly fair. It is fundamentally unjust, and it is also fundamentally unjust that this government has refused to consider any new reciprocal arrangements, despite the failure to do so impacting primarily on working people with a Commonwealth heritage. Congress, we must not forget the debacle over the treatment of people from the Windrush generation that is still carrying on today. The discriminatory treatment of black and minority ethnic British citizens that have worked, lived and contributed over decades to securing world-class standards in education, the National Health Service and other public services must not spill over into pension arrangements too. In too many cases, their lifelong contributions and hard work have been treated with contempt in the form of the threat of deportation, loss of employment, and access to education and healthcare. The fact that many black and minority ethnic British citizens have already been deported or lost to the system and have even died before achieving justice is a national disgrace. The all-party parliamentary group on frozen British pensions has put the case for partial uprating of state pensions for those pensioners whose pension benefits are frozen, meaning that they would be uprated going forward from their current rate. This would have an upfront cost to the UK government of 37 million, a relatively small amount for the Treasury. While the NSUWT does not present this as any kind of solution, it is deplorable that the government has ruled out a measure which would at least ensure that the pensions of UK working people who have retired abroad receive some annual uprating. The Black Workers' Conference is right to highlight the injustice of this, and the NSUWT urges support for the motion from you, our brothers and sisters. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Andrea. There's no other speakers, so I'm going to put motion 43 to the vote. All those in favour? Thank you. All those against? That's carried unanimously. Congress, just to update you, we've reached the end of scheduled business. We have one motion left, a very important one from the LGBT plus conference on homophobic and transphobic hate crime. There are 6 people who want to speak, and it wouldn't be right to try to squeeze that in at the end of conference business. So what we're going to do is pick that motion up tomorrow to ensure everyone who wants to speak will be able to speak. Have a point of order? Okay.
Julia Neal, NEU, and the proposer of motion 44, which we now learn will be held tomorrow. This motion was brought by one at the TUC Equality Conference. This represents a marginalised group, and not prioritising it is further marginalising it, in my opinion, and indeed, thank you, and indeed the opinion of people that I've spoken to from the committee representing the conference. Now, this is a composite motion from 4 different unions, chosen nearly unanimously at the LGBT conference. I think, we all think, it's not my motion, it's everybody's, that the content of the motion is vital, it's politically relevant, and it will get more important as time goes on. So, President, I've got 2 asks. Could you, if you are not able to hear it now, could you consider taking it tomorrow morning at the beginning so that we keep it together with all the equalities before everybody perhaps feels they need to go for an early train? I'm not saying you will, but... And I've got some thoughts about this, which I won't share now, but could we make sure that this situation doesn't happen again? Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Julia. I know this discussion's been going on this afternoon. I just want to say that we've had 30 contributions in the equality section, and I have given people all opportunity, if they didn't want to speak this afternoon, to try and get all the business in. It's precisely because we want to prioritise allowing everyone to speak. There's 6 people who want to speak, and we want to do this debate justice, that we don't want to try and do it at the end of the day. I will take advice from the GPC about when I can take it tomorrow, and I will come back to you on that in the morning. But I just want to be clear that the General Council absolutely wants to hear this debate, but we also want everyone to have the chance to speak. So thanks for your point of order. I'll take advice, and I'll come back to that in the morning. Delegates, we have now closed the conference, but in finishing, we did ask and we agreed this morning that we would now raise our posters on Show Racism the Red Card, and we did carry the motion on racism unanimously earlier on. So if people can do that, and can I take the opportunity now to thank everybody for those fantastic speeches this afternoon. I'll take advice on the point raised by Julia, and if you can all hold your cards up loud and proud, and we'll take some pictures. Thank you. that on? Yeah. Okay, thank you, Congress. That concludes this afternoon's business. Can I remind you of all the fringe meetings in the guide and on the screens? We're now adjourned until 9:30 tomorrow morning. Thank you.